So good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Nice cozy atmosphere for such a cold day, right? It's nice to have everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? Good. Okay, so just a few topics. Safety briefing, that's our exit right there. We do have first aid kit on hand if necessary. Restrooms are in the building just adjacent to us. They're unlocked right now, so feel free to use the restroom whenever. Make sure you sign the roster if you have not done so already. There are handouts available to you for the content today, so please take advantage of those. For those of you that have started your project, some of you have, make sure you fill out the form in the folder. And I know a few of you mentioned that you might want to collaborate with some of your classmates on some of the projects. Just let it be known that you're actively involved and that you would welcome participation. So if you want me or Virginia or Michael to help with that, we'd be happy to do that. And Michael is not here today. There's a boy, he's running a 10K. So
In the cold.
So when we see him next week, we'll have to commiserate on his victory, right? So that's a little bit of the housekeeping this morning. We have some great speakers today, but first we'd like to start with somebody who's here, who's actively involved with the pollinator garden at the premises. Terry Fitch, would you like to say a few words and promote your project, which is awesome out there?
Oh, and I am Joseph. Hi, guys. I was in your seat 7 years ago. I do not have a background in horticulture, botany, anything like that. I started out as a master gardener in 2003 in Lafayette, Louisiana. Was there 4 years and then transferred to Montgomery County. So I've got a long history of doing this kind of work. In like I said, all of our classes were here, and 4 of us decided that we'd help up here at Jones. Out of 4 of us, 2 of us have moved away. The 4th one actually is a neighbor, and she's an outreach, and I'm the last one standing. So they have made me, I guess, team lead, project lead by default. The beds up here, and I put a handout out there if any of you are interested in volunteering up here. We're doing primarily pollinator beds, and we're trying to convert most everything from what was not native to native. There are a few things that we've left that are not native because the butterflies like them way too much. We meet up here on Tuesdays. This time of year, I'm usually here at 9. In the summer, it'll back to more like 8, but we're here on Tuesdays. I know there's a lot of people in these classes that are teachers, have jobs, and can't come on Tuesdays. We're open to doing Saturdays. I'm happy to come up here on Saturdays for a while until a group can kind of get their feet planted and going. But yeah, we are primarily pollinator beds up here. One of the employees got fired a few years ago and came and sprayed everything with diesel fuel. So we had to start from scratch. The mountain laurel survived, and the passion vine survived, and pretty much everything else was annihilated. So we've rebuilt everything up here. I kept forwarding grant information to Lisa Houston, our president, and one day she looked at me and she said, "Would you like to be the fundraising director?" No, but I will. So we got 2 grants. One of them for a monarch way station up here, which is up next to the gazebo. This is a rough time of year to really see what anything looks like, but we just put that in this past year. And now we're putting in the propagation station, which is even further back. And we got I think it's a $4,000 grant for that. And we're working on that. So if anybody, I think we're doing another work day on that towards the end of February, and that will be on a Saturday. So if you guys want any hours, you guys, I know you prefer just woodworking and that kind of stuff versus pulling weeds. So that may be a good way for you guys to get some hours too. But we will put that out on the bulletin and let you know when that's being done. But my goal is to put a greenhouse back there. And I'm looking at grants for that right now. And let master gardeners, master naturals, NEPSOT, whoever, maybe we can do sections in the greenhouse for each group, but let us work together instead of trying to compete against each other constantly. And I think we'll get a lot more done. So if you've got any questions, I will be around the whole class. I'm more than happy to walk anybody around, show you what we're doing. The signs out there are all new too. Jaden, who I answer to here, is into the education. And again, I've been here since 19. And this year I just got fed up and said, we need signs. So we did that. So anyway, you got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Where do we show, when we come on Tuesday morning, where do we go?
Right back here.
The pollinator gardens right
yeah.
over here.
It's, I mean, it's,
So the pollinator gardens are right behind here, and that's where we go directly there. Okay.
yeah, and we've got a good group. Most everybody's been up here more than a year, so they know their ways around. But, yeah. You can, and we're allowed to park in the back. So if the gate's open, you can come back and park back here. And then you'll find a group of us. But where the building is, all of the beds, with the exception of the front one, all of the beds are behind that building.
Oh.
So we're pretty easy to find. Anybody else? All right, well, if anybody wants to do Saturday, let me know. Or if you want to come up on Tuesday, we are more than happy to have you. And I did put a flyer out to kind of show what we do up here. So if you're interested in the pollinators, go ahead and pick one of those up.
So her group has done some great impact for the community here and the forest here. So if you have an opportunity, I highly recommend volunteering. Cooler temperatures are obviously better than warmer temperatures in the summer, but if you don't have a problem with heat, still it's a great time to get out there and help the pollinators. And Terry, she does a great job. So also we had some great responses with key takeaways last week. We posted them over here. We're going to be doing it every week. So after the class or during breaks, come up to this flip chart and write down key takeaways from the presenters, and we'll follow up with that later on in your curriculum. So our first guest speaker today is Andre Hauser. He is a volunteer for Leave No Trace in the state of Texas, one of two people that have this role in Texas. He served in that role for about 10 years. He's a certified Leave No Trace instructor at a level 2 and has been an instructor since 2007. I think he's been doing it a while. You know your stuff.
No, I mean it will.
Yeah, at that time, he has led or co-led more than 40 Leave No Trace courses. He's been a Texas Master Naturalist and member of the Heartwood chapter since 2013. And during that time, he served as chapter president and for 2 years, and recently as treasurer for 8 years. So he's a great representative of the chapter and a lot of knowledge. So let's go.
Thanks. How many of you have heard of Leave No Trace? Uh-oh, well, I'm just gonna leave. So as she said, I'm a Texas state advocate. State advocate works for the Leave No Trace Center as a volunteer. It's our job to go out and represent the Leave No Trace Center, which is in Colorado, to people in our state. We were the first state to have 2. Usually there's 1. Now there's a couple other. I think California now has 2. The ones that are larger, and it just, I can't go to Dallas when somebody wants me to talk. So we have one here and we have one in Dallas. And so I've been doing that, like she said, for about 10 years. So I want to welcome you to Leave No Trace. And, you know, we're gonna talk about things. So everybody loves nature, right? I mean, you wouldn't be here if you didn't. But every one of us has an impact when we're out in the woods, whether it's small woods like this or somewhere in the Rocky Mountains or something like that. The more use, there's trash, there's compromised wildlife, there's fire, there's climate change. So everybody's nature is at risk. So Leave No Trace is one of the world's largest leading organizations that talks about those risks, and they teach people how to take action to care for the outdoors. When we leave no trace, we can keep our forests and outdoor areas healthy. We can protect our parks. We can keep our wildlife strong. We can prevent wildfires and hope that everyone and ensure that everyone is welcome to enjoy those places together. And hopefully we won't have somebody that pours diesel on the plant life. So research tells us that people trained in Leave No Trace are 5 times more likely to protect nature, and yet 9 out of 10 people still do not know the critical basic education that they need. Leave No Trace exists to change all that. That's what our mission is. So what we do is we empower people to be the solution to conservation. To do it, we advance the science and research to support the health of the outdoors. We're leading the way with Leave No Trace education and training for everybody to ensure they have the tools they need. We build sustaining partnerships and activate communities through education and restoration programs. Because when you leave no trace, you keep forests healthy, you protect your parks, and you keep your wildlife strong, you prevent wildfires, and you ensure that everyone is welcome to enjoy the same places that you do. So we try to empower people to be the solution to conservation, as I said. So we're leading the way with Leave No Trace education and training for all people to ensure that everyone has the tools they need. We have a comprehensive training program and education that are designed to ensure that not just outdoor professionals like land managers, like the rangers out here and other rangers and those people know and teach Leave No Trace, but also that everybody who gets out on the trail or enjoys their local park or does master naturalist work in the outdoors can enjoy it with their family and friends and what they need to protect nature. We design new programs every day to make Leave No Trace accessible to everyone. Environmental stewardship, and you'll hear the word stewardship throughout this course, I'm sure, is at the core of what we do. Leave No Trace builds sustaining partnerships and activates communities through on-the-ground training and restoration programs around the United States. We work with the international community to help them do the same. Our foundation is our education system. Our recommendations are based on the best science that's available to us. We work with the scientific community to conduct research that informs what we teach, what people respond to, and what will help our land, water, and wildlife thrive. If you think about Leave No Trace, think of it as a spectrum. On one end, there's small impacts, and on the other end, there's large impacts. Everybody has a different place on that spectrum. And it sometimes depends on your training, but it also can depend on your environment. You need to find your own place. Because like I said, everyone has a unique relationship with nature and their place on that spectrum may be different. And that's perfectly okay. You see from this graph, the number of visitors to protected areas is high and continues to increase. I was reading an article the other day, and it says in many of our national parks now, the more popular ones like Yellowstone, Yosemite, and places like that, you can't get in with just a park pass anymore. You have to call ahead and reserve a time slot. Not individual, but like I'll be there between 10 and 11. And if you go to the gate and haven't done that, they'll send you away because there are too many people there at certain times of the day. And about the only time you can get in without doing that is right when they first open for the day or when they're about to close for the day. And then that's a short time period. So be aware of that. I mean, it all started during COVID when people couldn't get out and go together to movies and things like that. So they started doing recreation in the woods where they felt safer and where there weren't people. And it's continued to grow exponentially since then. So it's wonderful that so many people are out there enjoying land. Increased visitation could lead to significant impact on the environment. More foot traffic means more wear and tear on the trails, a larger potential for litter, and we've all seen that just walking around even in a regular city park, and increased risk for disturbing wildlife. That's why the leave no trace principles that we'll go over here shortly are more important than ever. They give a framework for minimizing impact and ensuring that the lands remain pristine for future generations. If we educate visitors and practice leave no trace, we can help mitigate the negative effects of high visitation. So leave no trace has 7 principles. They're not rules. I teach this a lot to scouts. That's who I work through, is Scouting America. But I'll have to remind them, especially the old scoutmasters, that these are not rules, they're principles, they're guidelines. And so we're going to go with those individually. They're a simple yet effective framework for minimizing impact on the natural environment. Doesn't matter if you're hiking, you're camping, out doing scientific things, like or planting pollinator gardens, any outdoor activity. These principles help ensure that your beautiful natural space remain unspoiled for future generations. If you follow the guidelines, you can all contribute to the preservation of wild places. So, first one, plan ahead and be prepared. You know, that's no matter what you do. Everybody that's ever had any kind of course in anything to do with preparing I don't know, well, I was in the military. That was the first thing they taught us, plan. So, you know, what happens if you don't plan, right? You go merrily along, you just show up, you don't have an idea what you're gonna do. And this is what you end up with. I'll try to get this where it shows up on the owl. But effective planning not only ensures your safety, and we'll talk more about that towards the end of this presentation today, it helps minimize your impact on the environment. And don't forget, if you're out in the woods, you can't always depend on your phones. So one of the things you need to know is where you're going. So either download the map before you go or have a printed copy or something, because there may not be service out there, or your battery well, downloading won't help if your battery dies. So I always carry a paper map and I'm going somewhere that I'm not sure where it's at. Research the area you plan to visit. You start by researching your destination. You know what the terrain is. You know what the weather conditions are. I started watching the weather for this today about 3 days ago. You have to this time of year, especially. And the types of activities that are allowed in the area. Check for any regulations or guidelines that provided by Park Service or managing authorities. There's always a land manager wherever you are. Who's the land manager right here, do you think? It's the guy over there in that building over there, the ranger. Who's the land manager on a piece of private land? The owner. Yeah. There's always a land manager. And so he or she may have rules that apply only to that piece of ground where you are. For example, how many of you know if you're on crossing somebody's land and you come to a gate and you go through it, you leave it open or closed?
Leave it how you found it.
Exactly. You leave it like you found it. Don't assume anything. So But if you can't find the land manager, then leave it like you found it. That might include information about camping zones, fire restrictions, or sensitive habitats. Tell me a sensitive habitat out here. Pardon?
The woods right there.
Red cockaded woodpecker lives out here. It's a protected species. In certain times, they won't let you out there when they're doing nesting and stuff. Be ready for the weather. It can change quickly, especially in mountainous or remote areas. Check the forecast before you go and be prepared for unexpected changes. Pack clothing and gear that can handle the worst possible conditions you might encounter. Even if you're just out for the day doing master naturalist stuff. Take a rain jacket with you. You never know. Take a sweater. You never know. Your gear needs to be suitable for the environment and duration of your trip. That includes navigation tools, sufficient food and water, a first aid kit like we have over here, and make a checklist to ensure you don't forget any essential items. Remember, it's always better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And how many times have we heard that about things? Know the regulations. Familiarize yourself with the rules and regulations of the area you're visiting. Might involve permits, fire regulations, wildlife guidelines, and restrictions on where you can camp or even hike. If you follow the regulations, it helps protect the environment and ensure you have a safe and enjoyable trip. If you plan ahead and prepare thoroughly, you reduce the likelihood of emergencies and help protect the environment. Also, you can enhance your overall outdoor experience by being ready for whatever comes your way. Remember, good planning leads to great adventures. It also helps to enhance your safety in the outdoor environment. It is should have an easily accessible first aid kit. Make sure you have adequate food and snacks and hydration, like I said earlier. Don't forget your sunscreen and insect repellent in the summer, maybe even in the winter here in Texas. Bring a phone. Let one know where you are going and when you expect to return. And if that changes, let them know that it changed. You know, you should do this no matter where you're going. I just got back from a conference. I was out of town for 3 days. I told my wife what time I expected to be there. Then I let her know when I got there. I told her what time I expected to be home. And I got home on that time. But if something changed, I got in traffic, I'd call her. Okay, I'm going to be different. Do the same thing where you go to the woods, where you go, whatever. Someone needs to know where you are and when you expect to be back. Because if you don't make it back, then someone will know to look for you. Know how to identify and avoid things like poison ivy, poison oak, venomous snakes, and so forth. It's funny. In my HOA, we live on there's a giant drainage ditch behind our subdivision. And so there's snakes all the time. It's up in people's yards. Most of them are copperheads, but most people are about every 2 or 3 days in the spring and summer. What kind of snake is this? And they've got a picture of a snake. Most of them are not copperheads that when they're taking their pictures, they're rat snakes or something like that. But it's just, okay, can you not Google it? But, learn how to identify those things. And remember, safety is your responsibility, no one else's. And risks are not the same for everyone. Some may have medical vulnerabilities, like allergies. Some may have disabilities or lack experience. And some may be vulnerable to discrimination due to their race or ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, or other factors. Make a safety plan before you go. Know the location of the nearest medical facility and the nearest law enforcement and how to contact them. Have a communication plan, maybe an inReach or a similar device. Everybody know what that is? It's a satellite device that would work even if your cell phone won't. And you have to have a subscription, but you can send text messages with it, even though you might not be able to talk.
What did you call it?
InReach, INREACH,
By Garmin.
like a Garmin. Yeah. And there's other brands out there too. They're kind of expensive, not like an iPhone, but they're $300, but then you have to have a subscription, but you can get a short subscription so you don't have to carry it year round. And then be sure you have the proper, PPE, personal protective equipment for the project or activity that you're performing. So if you're working around bees, you should have bee protective equipment and so forth. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. So surfaces and living organisms we step on or interact with are susceptible to cumulative impacts from humans. If you've ever walked on a lawn, or if you have a nice lawn, not right now, but this spring, walk across your lawn back and forth about 8 or 9 times, and then turn and look at the path you walked. Everything will be flat. And if you walk it more than about 12 times, it'll start to deteriorate. We can do that out in the woods, just like that. Not only can we directly trample and kill vegetation or lichen or mosses, flowers or other living things, we can compact the soil and make areas unsightly. And if soil's compacted, it's harder for things to grow. It's always best to stick to designated trails and campsites when they're available. They were put in place to concentrate damage from a high amount of humans in a certain area. Like I said, it can take as few as 12 passes or maybe 25 nights of camping to impact the surface of an area enough to where it will not recover. If we're in an area without trails or campsites, or we're doing an activity that doesn't use them, then you might want to disperse our impact to a wider area or spread out in a group. One of the things I do with scouts is I put them in a wide field, and I do that thing. I have them one time up, one time back, and there's like 8 or 9 in a group, and they'll turn and they'll see their path that they made, following each other. And I used to do it here when we did this in the spring. And then I'm having them do it again by walking single or in a line, spread out, and you don't see a path because they go up and once and one time back instead of all 10 and behind each other. So if you come across a field with flowers or something, please don't follow each other. Please spread out and walk through it. So that will improve the chances that the spot will recover and keep others from following your exact track. Because if somebody comes, I went on a backpacking trip to New Mexico with scouts once, and it was a place that had no campsites. It was pristine. We leased it from some Rocky Mountain Elk Company or something. It was a ranch down by the very large array where they listen for aliens from outer space. But anyway, there were no campsites. There had a couple of places where they had built latrines, and there are a couple of places where they had put bear boxes where you could put your food overnight. But you found the campsites because everybody had picked the same one, and the trails were there to the latrines, and the trails were there to the bear boxes, and it only got used for 4 years by a few. They didn't let many scouts out there, but it's still the impact was there. Okay, dispose of waste properly. So the waste we create when spending time outdoors can have negative effects on the environment. That includes litter, that includes food scraps, that includes human waste, pet waste, and dirty water from washing dishes or yourself. The number one guideline is to pack it in, pack it out. Trash and litter left behind is not only unsightly, but it pollutes water and is dangerous for wildlife. Food waste like orange peels, pistachio shells, apple cores can take up to 2 years to decompose. They're also unhealthy sources of food for wildlife. It's not their normal diet, and it's not good for them. If we ate dog food or cat food, bring a bag so you can take your trash, and maybe others' litters also. I mean, part of that you can just take care of when you do your plan ahead and prepare thing. Because if you don't take it to the woods, it's not trash. It's at home. For example, if you're camping overnight, you have a box of cereal. There's 3 things. There's a cardboard box, or there's a wax bag. You don't need to take that with you. That's trash. Put it in Ziploc and take it with you. First of all, it'll keep it better if you don't use it all. Second of all, unless you're real squeamish, this Ziploc bag is reusable. You wash it until it gets a hole in it, and until then it becomes trash, but you just eliminated 2 pieces of trash that might get left in the woods. If you have a large group, we did this with scouts, don't go to Sam's or Costco and buy the 30 pack of chips for lunch, because that's 30 or 50 little bags and the little pipe pieces when they rip them open that could be left in the woods. The little pieces are called micro trash, at least that's what I call them. Buy a big one, put on a pair of gloves and serve them. If you're drinking milk or orange juice, don't buy the little Sunny Delight bottles and don't buy the little pints of milk, buy the gallons. It also saves you money, by the way. But the biggest thing is it takes care of trash. So you do that during the plan ahead and prepare stage. They talk about water. The water itself is not the problem, the dishwater. It's what's in it. So to help that, we would always have our scouts. First of all, we try to get them to do what we call sump their dish, which means get all the food out of it. And one way to do that is to lick it. I went into a Target once and they were having a sale on Lexan bowls, and I thought, hey, 50 cents a piece. This is pretty cool. But I needed to know if I could sump it. So when I let them put it, okay, people are looking at me, what are you doing? But anyway, it worked. And so I bought all of them and I gave them to the scouts. But another way they can do it is put water in it, stir it around, then drink it. And of course, I told one scout that on a backpacking trip we were on. He said, oh, that sounds gross. I said, wait a minute. Do you drink water? Yeah. Do you eat food? Yeah. So what's gross about it? You just combined them. They didn't answer. But anyway, you try to keep the food out of the dishwater. You can do that by, if nothing else, you can strain, you get food in there anyway. But before you get rid of the water, you strain it so there's no food gets out in the woods. The water itself can go out in the woods as long as it's nothing but water. A little soap in it won't hurt. So you can strain it. You can either buy these. I got these at Dollar Tree or somewhere. You can make your own. This is window screen. Those are handy for backpacking. Or what they give you at Philmont Scout Ranch is one of these. It's a Frisbee that they took an ice pick and made holes in. The thing that's nice about these, you can play with it when you're not using it. Of course, it kind of wobbles because of the holes, but still, the kids like that. But the point is, get rid of the food, and because it's all trash. It needs to come home with you. Campfires, when you have those, and I'll talk about that in another time. But the ashes, the gray ashes, can be broadcast into the woods, just like water without food in it. But if you have little leftover pieces of wood, like the little black things, nubbins, as I call them, that's trash. That can't be left there. In about 10 million years, if it got buried, if it's coal or carbon, it might become a diamond, but I'm not going to wait. So anyway, bring that out with you. Now, human waste. The first thing you do is, as part of your planning process, if you're somewhere that's like out here, find out where the restrooms are and use what's there. That's what they're there for, state parks, city parks, things like that. But some places don't have them. And sometimes you just have to go to the bathroom. So if first of all, urine doesn't hurt things unless you have 20 or 30 or 40 people in the same spot for 2 or 3 days. Then you'll get an excess salt built up and it might hurt the vegetation and it might encourage animals to come there looking for salt. But as a general rule, it won't hurt. Solid waste though, if you don't have a bathroom, you need to dig a hole at least 200 feet from a path, at least 200 feet from any source of water. And anybody know how you can get 200 feet without a tape measure? 70 steps minimum. A person's average step is about 30 inches long. Now, if you're real tall, maybe it's a few less. If you're real short, maybe a few more, but that's an average. So you dig a hole 6 or 8 inches deep, you do your business. If you possibly can, bring out the paper. If you just can't, then bury it. But I carry things when I go to the woods. Oh, yeah. This is a fun thing. There's all kinds of things you can take to the woods also to use for bathrooms. For example, they make seats for 5-gallon buckets. If that doesn't work for you, you can make your own seat from a pool noodle. Matter of fact, I used to see on eBay that people would go down to Home Depot and buy an orange bucket for $3 back then. They go buy a pool noodle from Dollar Tree for $1, and one of those would make at least two. And they'd cut one, put it on there. They'd disconnect this handle, put a roll of paper on there, and then they'd try to sell it for $50. Believe it or not, people would buy it. But anyway, they do that. That's it for groups. And then there's all kinds of portable toilets that, use for campers and stuff. You can take those with you too. But what about if you're by yourself? Well, there's all sorts of things. Probably the best thing is called a wag bag. And a lot of national parks and stuff will make you use something like this. It has inside of it, I think I've got one that's open here somewhere. That's a different color, but it's the same bag. It has two bags, one of which has a chemical in it called poo powder. And this chemical has been around for years. It turns liquid waste into gel, and it makes solid waste environmentally stable enough so that you can legally throw it in a dumpster. So I'm going to show you what it does to water. Got a little bag here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. Just have a spoon in here, but that's all right. I can do it without it. Doesn't take very much. Let's turn it into gel. If you want to pass it around, I don't need that back. So that makes it real easy. And there are places, some national parks actually won't let you dig the holes. They call them cat holes, by the way. I don't know why. But they won't let you dig a hole anymore because there are so many people out there that they're getting to the point where you don't know I mean, face it, we're all the same in a sense that we're going to find a place that's convenient and it looks like that would be a good place to do whatever it is we're needing to do. Well, chances are someone else has already been there. And it still doesn't, it's not great for the landscape to see, because you can't make the hole look exactly like it did. You try. So now a lot of them will give you what they call a blue bag, which is similar to this, only I don't think it has the powder. And if you're gone for a certain amount of time, they have an average thought of, you got to bring it back. If you don't go bring it back, they make you go back out there. So that's just, I mean, there was a place, I think it was Denali, that used to have one of those mountains anyway, used to have an outhouse sitting up near the peak. And they were spending like $3,000 a day flying a helicopter up there to clean that thing out. And it slowly got deteriorated because weather and stuff. And so when it got to that point, they just tore it down and they started doing the blue bags. And then so there's nothing up there anymore. And there used to be a lot of other weird theories about what you could do. And some of them are not so good. Like, well, I won't get into all of them, but they used to say stuff like you could smear it on a rock and it would, the sun would take care of it. No, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. Science has said that's not true. So, but you know, there's other things you can do. One of the little projects we did when I teach this course to scouts is we make them make this bag. This is probably a sample. You'd probably want to use a bigger one, but you know, save us money. This is a teaching thing. But you have this bag that's covered in duct tape, partly for reinforcement, but partly for concealment, so that you don't have to look at whatever it is. And inside you have a paper bag, and you use this for your product, and then you put it in here and you carry it around with you as your backpack, and you take it off. And then if it's not a wag bag, legally you should put it in your sanitary sewer and flush it down your commode. We had one of my instructors, oh, by the way, when you're digging your hole, there's 2 or 3 different things you can use. Used to be these orange trowels were made by a company up in Minnesota. And then they got bought out and quit making them. They might be being made again, I'm not sure. They were good because they had little marks, you know, you knew how far down to dig. And so everybody used to carry these, it was backpacking. And the only problem with them is in a real rocky soil, they might break. Somebody said they've never broken one. I have. Luckily there were more than one on the, track. Nowadays, you used to be able to get these for $1. You can't get them. Nowadays, Fiskars makes one. And you used to be able to get these for $1. But now if you go try to buy them individually, they're about $6 or $7. But every once in a while, you can find somebody that'll sell 20 or 30 for like $20 or $30. But the problem is when you find them, the garden clubs do too, and they buy them all up if you're not watching it, because they use them for their things too. What I like about this one though, is this thing will come off and you can put a little bit of toilet paper in the handle. So anyway, different things you can do. There's all kinds of weird ones out there. This is one that the Leave No Trace Center sells, and they think it's great because it doesn't weigh but I don't know, 1/3 of an ounce or something like that. But I don't like it because I think it has the potential to hurt your hand when you're using it. It's metal. I made one once, lightweight backpacking out of a snow stake that I bought at REI. It's a real light thing. I took a cork that you can either drink a bottle of wine or you can go to Walmart somewhere and buy a bag of corks and put it up here and wrapped it with electrical tape, and that took care of the hand problem. And it weighed nothing. I have a friend who taught Leave No Trace with me in the Dallas area. And he made, I don't see it, it's here somewhere. He made what he called a silver burrito container. And what he did is he took a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, and inside it were 4 or 5 more gallon-sized Ziploc bag and several pieces of foil. And so he, whenever he needed to use his business, he would take one, use it, kind of roll it up like a burrito, and cover it with foil, and then put it inside the main bag. And so one bag would probably last you a week. And he called it that because it was kind of handy because it was concealed by the foil. And it was also good for he led a venturing crew, and that's a co-ed thing. And so feminine products can't be left out there either. And so while it probably never bothered the ladies to carry things out, the boys couldn't handle it. We're so immature, but so that helped with that too. Nowadays, there's, I was talking about urine doesn't hurt anything, but there are, for the ladies, females have ever backpacked? What's one of the worst things you can do? What's one of the most inconvenient things in the woods as a backpacker?
Being on your period.
Well, other than that,
Okay.
other than that, second makes the most. How you have to urinate, right? You gotta take the backpack off and all that stuff. Well, not anymore. They make all kinds of things that allow females to urinate standing up.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to look at them, they can. We won't go into it right now. But they're there, and you can even get. Where did I put it? You can even get portable. Oh, there it is. You can even get a portable. Bidet, should you want to use one. Or you can make your own. You get a bottle and you poke a little hole in the cap. Anyway. As I was starting to say earlier, I have a bag that I always take with me when I'm in the woods. This is my emergency bag. Inside of it, I keep paper. I keep a wag bag. I keep hand sanitizer and stuff. Camp soap. And a little shovel. This is, I like this one because it won't break like the orange plastic one did. So, if you ever see me go into the woods and I'm carrying it, please don't follow me. So anyway, you know, every time when I was going, I don't know why, but when I was going through this course and learning to be an instructor, that was the thing I had to present. And I don't know why they picked me, but when I first went through, I became what they called a trainer then. Now it's called a Leave No Straight Instructor Level 1. And so I liked it, and I went through a week-long thing and did level 2, and they picked me to do that one again. I don't know if there's something about it, but you know. So that's what you think about with human waste. Keep in mind, if you're in places like above the tree line, or maybe in desert environments, it may take longer for stuff to decompose. So maybe dig it deeper, or maybe you have to pack it out or use the wag bag, like I said. But then don't forget about your pet waste if you have your dog with you, or I don't know too many people that take cats to the woods, but I guess you could. But pet waste carries disease that can spread to wildlife and pollute water sources just like human waste can. So take a bag with you and pick it up and put it in and carry it out. How many have seen people walk along the park, put their pet waste in a bag and set it on a post or something for other people to pick up?
Yeah.
Don't do that, please. Because first of all, some animal may tear it open and it spread it, or you forget about it. You know, if same thing, if you're walking along and you find trash, don't set it there to pick up, come back and get, because you may not come back the same one. Pick it up then, take it with you. I think that's all we'll talk about waste. So the next thing, leave what you find. Everything you find in nature plays a role in the environment or tells a story of past people and current culture. Please protect your living plants and trees by not carving into them. Carving into trees breaks their protective barrier, making them more susceptible to disease. If you pick a flower, it may not seem like it has a big impact, but you know what? If it's gone, nobody else can see it. Here's part of a puzzle. It's not all there. Now, you may be able to figure out what it will look like, but you still can't see the whole thing, right? Because somebody took that piece of that puzzle on. So, you know, leave them, take a picture. And remember, pollinators may depend on just a few species in a small range to survive. So you take one, you may be hurting the pollinators. Leave other things like antlers and bones for other visitors to enjoy. Those items may also provide important nutrients to local critters. Don't stack rocks or create your own cairns. The ones that are there for a reason. Sometimes moving rocks may disturb the ecosystem, and in areas where cairns are used for direction, you could cause other people to get lost. If you're enjoying the outdoors, you may come across things like structures, arrowheads, clay pots, old tin cans, and other evidence of past people. Leave them as you found them, so other people can enjoy and protect the culture and spiritual connections tied to those items. Observe but do not touch any structures, any rock imagery, or historic inscriptions you might find. And remember, finally, invasive species can have damaging impacts on ecosystems. So when you can help minimize the spread of those by brushing off your boots, your bike tires if you're riding a bike, by cleaning, draining, and drying watercraft before and after every outing. When I was in the military, I was in the Mediterranean for 2 different deployments. And when we came back, we had to stop in Rota, Spain, and do what they call de-snail. And that means the ship had to be cleaned before they let us come back across the Atlantic. Same idea. Minimize campfire impact. Fires are an important part of many people's experience in the outdoors. And Leave No Trace is pro campfire when allowed. But it's critical that you do everything you can to have a safe and responsible fire. Use a camp stove if you're cooking. Camp stoves come in all shapes and sizes. They're much quicker. They're easier for cooking than a fire, and they also create far less impact, and your food's more likely to be properly cooked instead of burnt on one side and raw on the other. Before having a fire, always check the local restrictions and make sure you understand that it's what's allowed under each level of restriction. Keep in mind, in dry and windy conditions, it may not be safe to have a fire, even if there are no restrictions. If campfires are allowed, always use a designated or existing fire ring. Please don't build your own. That reduces the footprint of the damage the heat of the fire has on soils and vegetation. I don't know if you know this, but under our campfire ring, for a depth of at least 12, 13, 14 inches, there's a dead zone. The heat has killed that soil. Nothing will grow there unless you dig it up and replace it. Firewood, please buy it locally to avoid introducing invasive tree species to an area, or you can gather it if it's allowed. But if you do, gather only wood that's dead, it's down, it's kind of away from where you are, and it's smaller than your wrist. You don't need giant logs. Dead and down wood burns quickly, and it's easy to collect. It does not disturb the ecosystem. Don't bring it from home. Because if you're traveling more than 25, 30 miles, 25, 30 miles, it might be okay. But you're moving different, like I said, you have the possibility of taking insect larvae and things with you. Never leave your fire unattended. That's how many wildfires are started. When you're done with your fire, burn all the wood to ash, like I said, and drown your fire with water. Stir it, douse it again until it's cool, till you put your hand on it and leave it there. Fires that are not put out completely can reignite pretty easily with wind and can start a wildfire. I don't know if you heard this, but some of you probably have, but firefighters sometimes have to go back to a house fire they put out because it rekindles, because somewhere something was still smoldering. Never burn trash or food scraps. That releases harmful chemicals, including some that cause cancer, and burning food may attract unwanted visitors to your campsite. We've sure changed a lot since I was a Boy Scout. We used to throw everything in the fire. Matter of fact, I was heating up a can of, or I wasn't, but somebody with me was heating up a can of tamales once in the campfire, and he forgot to open it first. It exploded. Yeah, it exploded. Respect wildlife. Whenever you're in an outdoor space, you're in the natural habitat of many wild animals. And it's imperative to minimize your impact on them. Human impacts on wildlife can result in negative human-wildlife interactions, aggressive animals, a decline in the ecosystem's health, and relocated or euthanized animals. All these impacts can be avoided if we respect wildlife on all outdoor trips. You know what they tell us when you go to the mountains? A fed bear is a dead bear. Because what will happen if you feed them human food, they will get to accustomed to the taste and the smell, and they will come looking for it because it's easier than finding their natural food. And if they come and raid a tent or something, they'll get relocated. And then if they come back and raid it again, they'll be put down. And so think about it. And also, don't be one of those Carls that goes up there and stands in front of a moose or an elk and try to get a selfie and end up having to be medevaced. People just observe wildlife from a distance. Do not follow or approach them. There's a rule that they call the rule of thumb. If you can put your thumb up there and see any of that animal, you're too close. If you can completely block it out, then you're far enough away. Another way to look at it is if you're close enough that you cause them to change what they're doing, then you're too close. I was on my course to teach this, the week-long course, and we're walking along and there's some deer eating, grazing, 200 yards away, I thought. I pick up my hiking pole and I told the guy, look at those deer over there. And they just took off running. Well, okay, do I fail yet? And we just started out. So, so you don't want to change what they're doing. Never feed them. Like I said, it damages their health. It alters their natural behaviors, exposes them to predators and other dangers. In order to keep your food and trash away from wildlife, you need to secure them and follow food and storage regulations for the area you're visiting. This is called a bear bag. You hang it in a tree. You put all your smellable things, food, sometimes deodorant if you have it. I don't know who, I don't take deodorant in the woods, but some people do. Toothpaste, things that might have an odor that's different. And you hang it in a tree that's at least 12 feet from a tree trunk, at least 12 feet in the air. And that's kind of hard to do. It's got long ropes that you have to figure out how to get it over them. And the hard part is getting it 12 feet from the trunk. 12 feet in the air is not as hard. Here's the issue. A lot of bears have figured out how to get them anyway. And so now a lot of the places have, I mentioned a bear box. It's like a dumpster, metal, only it's a half a dumpster that has locks on it with steel doors, not plastic doors. And you put your food in there and lock it up at night. Or they make bear food containers that look like this. This one has a screw-on lid, and it's got one of those kind of like an adult-proof medicine bottle that, because bears don't have opposable thumbs, so you have to hold this thing down when you slowly lock it. That'll hold enough food for one person for a good weekend. Backpacking type food. So that's there. And while the bear can get this and roll it around and play with it, no one's ever seen one ever get broken open. So you might have to go looking for it in the morning or something like that.
I've learned the hard way that you also should lock your car if there is a bear area.
Yeah, and make sure the windows are rolled up.
Yeah.
I was teaching a different kind of course once, and a guy brought up a brand new pickup, and he had eaten jerky or something in his car, and just eating it. It wasn't left in there. And brand new pickup. Raccoons got there and ate the rubber seal around his window, trying to get in there. And he didn't, because he had let it crack, and they were trying to make it bigger where they could get in there. Raccoons and things like that are probably worse than bears. So, so all this stuff will help, and the bear bag will help protect from the raccoons, but bears can get them down now. So just be aware of that. And if you can't control your pets when you're there, then leave them home. And be careful of wildlife during sensitive times when they're mating, when they're nesting, and when they have young people around them, young animals around them. And finally, the seventh principle is be considerate of others. Everybody belongs in the outdoors. It belongs to all of us. It's important that we remember that our actions can impact the experience and enjoyment of other people. One of the most important aspects of outdoor ethics is to maintain courtesy towards other people. It helps everyone enjoy their outdoor experience. If you make too much noise, if you have pets that are out of control, all that can, and if you damage surroundings, they detract from the natural appeal of the outdoors. So being considerate of others ensures that everybody can enjoy nature no matter how you interact with it. Respect others and protect the quality of their experience. Be courteous. Yield to them on the trail. Like I said, keep your pets under control and let nature sounds be what they listen to. Be mindful the noise you make impacts other people and wildlife. If you got to listen to music or watch TV, put in headphones. So when you talk about recreation, you often talk about the 5 steps of the recreation experience. And believe it or not, recreation includes master naturalist stuff. You're recreating out in the woods. You're just doing it for a purpose. First step, planning stage. We talked about that. Plan ahead and prepare. When you decide, that's when you decide what trail to hike, what you ride, where you're going to ride, or what park you're going to visit. Next is you travel in to where you're going. You might be in a car, you might be on an airplane, you might be on a bus, might be on Amtrak, but you're on your way. Then you get there, you get to the trailhead or the natural area, and you start to enjoy your activity. And then when you're done, the experience is over. That's the next step. And you're headed home. Maybe you're thinking about work the next day or the errands you need to run later. And then finally, there's what they call a reflection stage. And that's when you're thinking about your trip, how pretty it was, how much you enjoyed your time with family and friends, and maybe you even consider going back again. Traditionally, the opportunities for leave no trace education have only been available in the anticipation phase, the first step, through the land manager websites and the on-site experience through things like signage and the occasional conversation with a local ranger. But now we know that the most critical time to reach people with leave no trace is during the anticipation and planning stage. If you showed up to the trailhead and didn't know that there was steep terrain and it recently rained, there's not much you can do about not having your hiking boots with you because you're there, especially if it's been a long trip. So working within the tourism industry, Leave No Trace has tried to expand its reach within this phase, as well as incorporate Leave No Trace into other phases of the visitor experience, like travel to and reflection. Extends beyond merely participating and incorporating the 7 principles into your outdoor adventures. Back in 2022, we introduced Leave No Trace in daily life because we know that leaving no trace begins not only before you're out in nature, but it's a way of living. Science tells us that. We also know that everyone has a distinct and unique relationship with what we consider nature and the natural world. Now we have basic guidance about being a better environmental steward closer to home and in your community, with recommendations about how to reuse and recycle, minimize energy consumption, and even how to use social media to leave no trace. I'd highly recommend, if you're interested in it all, Leave No Trace has a ton of YouTube on practical things like how to dig a cat hole, how to purify water, and they're all about 5 minutes long or less. So they're real easy to watch. Remember, indigenous people have been incorporating land stewardship concepts for centuries. Leave No Trace is a framework for education that's been around since the 1960s. And the organization itself was formed about 30 years ago to put a single structure in place. Initially, it was formed for public lands in the US. From there, science and training programs have developed to ensure that everyone who loves nature has access to consistent and informed messages and education. So that brings us to today. Organizations made up of a vast network of advocates and volunteers from all walks of life, scientists, partner organizations and companies, groups from around the world, as well as agencies that manage lands, all come together with a shared belief that empowering people is the best way to protect nature. And we're going to talk about that network real quickly. First of all, we're committed to fostering diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, within our organization across the outdoor community. We recognize that everybody should have equal opportunities to experience and enjoy the outdoors, regardless of the background or identity. We have, through intentional efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in our programs, policies, and partners, we strive to create a welcoming and an equitable outdoor environment for everybody. Our commitment to DEIA is integral to our mission of protecting outdoor space. Some examples include offering the website in multiple languages, working to provide more and more materials in Spanish, and updating training guidelines to improve accessibility opportunities. We continue to update Leave No Trace curriculum materials to more clearly outline inclusive practices within outdoor ethics and to evaluate and eliminate problematic and outdated terminology in our publications. We work to make outdoor spaces inclusive and accessible. It's fundamental to the core mission of Leave No Trace, which is to ensure a sustainable future for the outdoors and the planet for everybody, here, now, and in the future. People who Leave No Trace make a tremendous impact. Our members who have joined the movement provide support and resources to ensure the program is getting into the hands of those who need it most. State by state advocates like me and other key volunteers are on the ground to organize workshops, education events, and there's almost 75,000 instructors that have been trained to bring Leave No Trace to life in their communities. We have formal partnerships with major federal land management agencies like National Park Service, Forest Service, and lots of others. They provide education and tools that are specific to the lands and populations they serve. We've worked with Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona, Acadia National Park in Maine, along the Appalachian Trail, and on visitor education in Yosemite, Denali, and in the Tetons on research to help them reduce waste. And we've done programs in city parks and state parks in Florida, Ohio, and Minnesota on Leave No Trace programs for the unique issues they're facing in their community. We've done it in other states too. And we have over 600 partnerships with companies, with local nonprofits, with tourism offices, with outfitters and guide services. We can extend our reach even further with their distinct constituents, customers, who all seek experience in the outdoors and who need Leave No Trace education. Imagine a world where everybody knows and practices Leave No Trace. Like I said, it's growing every day. Like 1/5 of our 75,000 trainers are from the international community. More than 96 countries have formed partnerships, have educators teaching Leave No Trace in their communities, and or have government engagement with the program. The Leave No Trace organizations in Ireland, Japan, Canada, and New Zealand will be joined by Leave No Trace Korea. Matter of fact, I think that happened about a year ago. And more are to come, supporting the vision for the world for a global citizenry committed to Leave No Trace education. Our program. We focus around two major initiatives: Leave No Trace in every park and Leave No Trace for every kid. The goal of the program is to bring Leave No Trace to the communities and to provide on-the-ground opportunities for everybody to take on an active stewardship role. And I tell you, kids usually get it better than adults and quicker than adults. We're kind of set in our ways, I guess, as adults. My wife says I am. These programs take many forms, including service work, research, interpretive materials, staff and volunteer training, public education, on-site signage, Leave No Trace spotlights, Leave No Trace hotspots, Leave No Trace gold standard sites, citizen science projects, and working with government agencies, state and local tourism, and so forth. In a typical year, the organization conducts more than 600 education events in most of the lower 48 states, reaching over 15.5 million people. We work with partners and volunteers on in-person workshops to train more than 500 advanced educators. Our online training program reaches over 40,000 people a year. We work with parks and protected areas, programs, and organizations to achieve Leave No Trace Gold Standard designation. The Spotlight program brings together our shared love for the outdoors with a dedication to preserving our well-being and beauty. We hand select nominated, or nomination has to happen first, outdoor spaces that need collective care and attention. By designating them as spotlights, we're rallying, we gather the local community to step up, join forces with Leave No Trace, and make a meaningful impact that can help revitalize and protect special places where we can recreate, enjoy one another's company, and help elevate our health physically, mentally, and emotionally. They get 3 days of activation work. It's put on by the Subaru Leave No Trace traveling teams. There's, I think, 3 teams of trainers. There used, for a while, there were 4 budget cuts. Now they went back to 3. These people live on the road. It's a couple usually, can be two males or 2 females, but usually it's a married couple. One of their rules is they have to camp at least 270 days a year. Wow, that's terrible. They travel around in a little Subaru Crosstrek that's loaded down with stuff and has things on carriers on top of stuff. And, you know, I got the pleasure of working with a pair of them here about 6 years ago down in the Klein School District. There was a teacher down there that ran a Leave No Trace program before school. And so one day she reached out and got them to come. And we spent the whole day with these kids that are in her program. And it was just cool as it could be. But anyway, they travel around and do this stuff. And it's a 3-year tour, and sometimes they let them renew, but usually every 3 years they're looking for somebody new. So, and you all want to do that, you can check their website because they send out, they take applications. I don't know how much they pay you, not much, but they do pay for all your expenses for that 3 years. But it can include service projects, staff and community training, and so forth. Then we have the hotspots. Is that where I'm at? Yep. That's places around the country that face the threat of an irreversible impact, sometimes closure if you can't recover them and give them back to their healthy state. Hotspot program features 5 days of in-person education programming that aim to guide land managers through education and messaging audit. These programs are successful because LNT, or Leave No Trace, involves stakeholder and partner organizations from the start and encourages a community-wide approach to impact reduction. We've conducted to date, and this was a year and a half ago, more than 110 hotspots around the country. Again, they're 5 days site-specific. They're a blend of educational programs, stewardship projects, community engagement, public land workshops, and more. And you can go online and find out about them at lnt.org and Google or search hotspots. And then they have the gold standard. That's the highest form of recognition for sites and organizations and programs that achieve that designation. They're recognized nationally for their implementation of Leave No Trace. The process provides a framework for building a well-developed educational program that can result in more informed visitors and less recreational related impacts. Leave No Trace for Every Kid is a program that helps young people learn how responsible actions can help protect the outdoors. It's shaped and inspired by a rich diversity of young people and their communities that have found joy and discovery and is learning through the outdoors. If you're equipped with Leave No Trace training, it makes the communities and outdoors healthier. Practicing Leave No Trace is something we can all do when we interact with nature, and a skill we can pass down to the next generation. 85% of people believe that Leave No Trace helps protect the environment for future generations. So we have 2 tracks in our training program. We have an instructor track and recreational track. And this is something they just started 2 or 3 years ago. We used to be called, all we used to have was the training for instructors. And we had one called the 2-day program was a trainer, it was a 16-hour course. And then the 5-day was a master educator. They changed all that a couple of years ago and they have 2 tracks now. And instead of trainer and master educator, you're called instructor level 1, instructor level 2. So I'm former master educator, and I'm instructor level 2. They also have an instructor level 3, and there's only a couple of organizations that use that, and those people are picked by the organization, and they're the ones that actually lead an instructor level 2 course. Their training is no different than instructor level 2. They're administrating it. So the instructor track is designed, like I said, to those who want to teach Leave No Trace. It's a 2-year certification, has to be renewed every 2 years. I renewed about a month ago. Level 1 instructor courses can be held in person. They can be held virtually or a hybrid for 2 days, a total of 16 hours. Level 1, they're certified to co-instruct level 1 instructor course, even though it has to be led by instructor 2, and they can teach skill courses and workshops. Level 2 instructor courses are 5 days. They have to be in person. They're certified to teach level 1 instructor courses, skill courses, and workshops. And then the recreational track is designed for those who have a desire to learn the skills and information, but don't really want to get out and teach. That's something new, and I think I do a lot of those through Scouting America. They don't want to teach, but they want to learn. And then they have workshops, anywhere from 30 minutes to a full day. This is a workshop. Recreational training courses are able to receive certificates of completion. These are some of the providers of level 2 instructor courses. That says Boy Scouts of America is now called Scouting America. But if you look at those, Knowles and other places like that, National Outdoor Leadership School, the Scouts are the only one that I'm aware of where the instructors are not paid to teach the course. We're all volunteers. So when we teach a course, of course, we can only teach it to Scout people because for insurance reasons. But our courses cost maybe $300 for a 5-day course, or less than 100 for a weekend course. You go to one of these other places, the weekend course would be $300 or $400, and the 5-day course would be a couple of thousand. That's because their instructors are paid. That's their job. That's what they do for a living. So, if you ever want to take a course, I don't think Scout for 6 months. Don't tell Scouts I said that. And then they have a 101 course. It's just one example of our online course training offerings. That's free. You can get it online. It's about 45 minutes. They have lots of other courses online, and many of them are free. Some of them you don't even have to be a member. You can just go search it. In the course, they have helpful information with a simple framework of impact practices to apply when spending time outdoors. Skip some of this because I'm running out of time and I want to do some stuff. So we're going to move right through. Everybody has a role to play. Leave No Trace works. We protect the world when people like you learn it, practice it, live it, and share it. So I want to see, just for fun, what y'all think. We're going to do these play a little quick ethical game. We're going to talk about, I'm going to give you 3 scenarios, and we're going to take a vote on which one's the worst. Okay? Because remember, I said it's a spectrum. So what's worse for some people may not be worse for others. And we'll do that 3 times, and then we'll come back and pick the winners of those 3, and then see what's the worst of that. So that as a collective group, we're going to figure out what's the worst thing out of these 9 scenarios. Now, I do this in person. We've got about 40 of these, and it takes a while to get this, but 9's not too bad. So the first one, names carved in trees. I don't know if People, some of them might hear maybe almost as old as me, but that used to happen a lot, you know. MK plus AF carved into a tree with a heart around it. So names carved in trees. A hiker passing while talking loudly on his or her cell phone, or cigarette butts found and discarded on the trail. So who thinks cigarette butts is the worst? One, two, one. There are no right or wrong answers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. The loud cell phone. Okay. Names carved in trees. Winner. Names carved in trees. Okay. Barely. Number 2. Half burned food scraps and trash in a fire ring. A person hiking with their pet off the leash, or a person picking flowers while hiking. Person picking flowers. About 5 of you. Person hiking with their pet, no leash. 2 or 3. Half burned food scraps and trash in, okay, that's a winner. Human waste piles along a trail or a riverway. A cultural area picked clean of artifacts. Or mountain bike ruts on a designated non-biking trail. Mountain bike ruts on a non-biking trail. Oh, nobody. Cultural area devoid of artifacts. And then human waste piles. The human waste by about 2.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go back. Human waste piles on along a trail or a riverway. Half burned food scraps and trash in a fire ring. Or names carved in trees. Names carved in trees. 3, 4. Half burned trash. 1, 2, 3. Wait, keep them up. Or human waste pile. 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, the winner today is half burned food scraps and trash from the fire ring, with human waste piles a close second. So but every time you do this, you're going to get a different answer. Now, there's a couple of them that never win. But the 3 you picked, it's always one of those, almost always one of those 3. And we have a lot of different ones when I do it. I've got a stack of cards like this long. I can make this thing last an hour and a half just playing the game. And it's always interesting. And when I do it with youth, I let them try to convince, we'll take a vote and they'll be on sides and each side will vote. And then I'll let them try to convince the other side and then we'll vote again. So anyway, it's fun. Okay. Taught you the thumb trick. Yep. So we'll do a real quick thing on trash. So how long do you think it takes for a cigarette butt to decompose? Up to 1 year, 1 to 5 years, 100 years, or 10 years? What do you think?
C, 100 years.
At least 10.
Well, actually, that one's 1 to 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's made of largely vegetable type material, paper and stuff like that.
Right.
How about a tin can? 50 years, 150 years, 80 to 100, or 1 million?
Yeah, 150.
Well, it's actually 50.
Overestimating me.
Okay. Nylon fabric. 20 to 30 years, 30 to 40 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years?
40 years, 30.
30 to 40. Glass bottle. The choices are 25, 30, 100, or 1 million.
Does glass ever disintegrate?
That's why they say a million. They don't know. Nobody's lived long enough to know. A 6-pack holder. Yeah. 50 years, 75 years, 80 to 90, or 100. Well, who said 100? It's right. Okay, there was another thing I was gonna show you. I got it real quick. Durable surface challenge. Which one of these do you think would be a durable surface? A grassy field, snow, a cryptobiotic soil crust, or a wildfire meadow?
No,
And why do you think?
because it's protecting the ground.
And it melts.
And
Your footprints will go away.
Right.
Anybody know what cryptobiotic soil is? It's actually a living organism. If you've ever been out in west where the wagon trains used to go and you see those ruts going across there, there's a little crust there that if you step on it, it crunches. That's cryptobiotic soil.
Okay.
And those trains, wagon trains were more than 100 years ago. The ruts are still there. Because they killed that soil and made an impression, and it won't go away because the soil around the ruts is still there. But it's a living organism. Okay, this is not to be easy. Gravel, sand, moss, or water. Which one's durable? Maybe I should say which one.
So what's the real question? I mean.
Maybe the real question is which one's not durable.
Moss.
Okay, because think about it. Gravel's obvious. That's durable. But sand, if it's just sand, that loose sand, it's gonna blow away. The wind will blow it and wipe out your track. And water, if you walk through water, that's not,
Changes constantly.
yeah, it changes constantly. Nobody ever walks the same river twice. So that's almost the end, but I want to give you a little mnemonic to help remember the 7 principles. Remember, the first one is plan ahead and prepare. Or think, plan ahead and prepare. One finger. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. Dispose of waste properly. You can either use that, you're digging a hole, or you're throwing your trash in the trash can. Leave what you find. Take only pictures. Be careful with fire. Flames. Respect wildlife. And be friendly or considerate of other visitors. Peace, but hello. That's what we use to help younger people remember that. Are there any questions? Anything I can? Andre Hauser. It's on, if you got one of the wooden nickels. Oh, okay. Yeah, and my email address is on there as well. So if you have questions about any of this, go to lnt.org. Look through their website. You don't have to join. There's obviously they'd like you to join, and donate or whatever, but there's a lot of free education and a lot of free stuff there. Go to their YouTube videos. You don't have to pay anything to do that, and do some research. And no question, I hope everyone got a set of these. This is a version written for children or younger people. The tan one is the one that was the original. Now by the way, there's now about 30 of these. They write them for special things like fishing, trail riding, hunting. So, but it's all the same principles. They just have different suggestions to go in. And then this white one is for what they call front country camping, like you would do in a state park or a organized camping area and things like that. And then you got the nickel and the handouts. So thanks for your attention and please leave no trace.
Addison Gaines is new to the Houston area as of 2 years ago. She is a transplant from Michigan and received her bachelor's degree in environmental science from Wayne State University in Detroit and her master's degree in environmental conservation from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And it's amazing that you received your master's degree and you're just like in your twenties, so. Wonderful. While studying at Madison, Addison conducted research on the red fox occupancy in urban areas across the United States and their influences as far as behavior. Professionally, Addison has worked on as a project manager for an environmental restoration company and a project coordinator for an environmental consulting firm, both in the Detroit, in the Metro Detroit area. Currently, Addison is an urban wildlife biologist for Texas Parks and Wildlife, where she performs professional planning, management, research, and outreach with wildlife habitat, natural resource management specific to the Houston area. Great resource. We're glad to have her here today. Would you like to entertain questions during the presentation or after?
Do both.
Okay, okay, so take it away.
All right, give me a minute. Get through all the buttons.
I love your socks, by the way.
Uh-huh. That's our symbol, dragonflies.
I was like, well,
What happened here? Why did it?
socks match her, I love it.
All right, that
Perfect.
should work.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So a little bit about what I do to get started as an urban wildlife biologist is we essentially provide guidance to various people like private landowners, businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, people like that on how to make urban spaces more suitable for wildlife. And then we also help with human wildlife conflict and help promote coexistence in urban spaces. So mostly covering the greater Houston area. So getting started with urban systems, I think this is a really important topic to discuss since we are near one of the biggest cities in the country and it's only continuing to expand. And we're also seeing other cities grow at a rapid rate around the world as well. So there's a lot of topics that coincide with urban systems, as you've probably gathered as you read through the chapter. So the goal of my presentation is to kind of skim the surface on a lot of these relevant topics, as well as add some additional topics that I can cover as an urban wildlife biologist. So to get started, what is urbanization? Urbanization is the process by which towns and cities are formed and become larger as more and more people begin working and living in these central areas. So as we eliminate more of our natural areas to build up these cities, we have countless species of wildlife that begins to adapt to this new environment, which creates the study of urban ecology, or the study of humans in cities, nature in cities, and the coupled relationship between humans and natural systems. So when we look at urbanization here in Texas, these two figures show what urbanization looks like and the projected population growth that we're going to see over the next 40 some years. So as you can see from this figure here, in 2020, our population was about 29.5 million people. And by 2060, it's projected to be closer to 46.5 million people. So we're only going to see populations grow and urbanization continue to expand. So when we're looking at this figure right here, this is showing what the percent population change will look like regionally in Texas. So as you can see, it's kind of covered by the zoom, but the dark red is going to be our highest population percent change. And what this figure is showing, let me see if I can move this out of the way. There we go. So what I want you to pay attention to is Obviously, we're seeing the Dallas, Houston, Austin areas, as you probably expected, having these highest changes. But it's not in the city center, it's the outskirts of the city. So that's what that urban expansion looks like. So in this greater Houston area, we're seeing this mostly northwest, since we've already seen a lot of development north. Can't really develop too much more east since we'll hit the bay. West, we've already developed a lot, and same with south. So that northwest is where we're probably going to see a lot of development in the next 10 or so years. And then this figure just shows the urban to rural population comparisons that have changed through 1910 to 2010. So as you can see, the rural share of the population in Texas has been the majority until around 1950. And that's when the urban share of the population started to outweigh the rural share due to economic boom, expansion of infrastructure, and the military industry. And then since 2010, it's essentially leveled out. So we still have that same distribution of 15% to 84% share, which makes Texas the 15th most urban state in the US.
Whoops, sorry. I was trying to get rid of that little thing in the corner. And it's stuck with me. Never mind. I'll just leave it there.
I can move it if it's in the way of something. So these next few slides, I just want to visually show what urban expansion looks like. So this map is from 1990, and pay attention to that tan color because that kind of indicates the built environment on Google Earth. So watch how it changes throughout the years. So we have 1990 here. Then we have 2000, 2010, and 2020.
Wow.
And then it looks pretty much the same as of now. So I'll go back so you can see it in reverse. So 2010, 2000, and 1990. So lots of urban expansion in this region. So with this huge expansion of urbanization, it's important to understand the implications of this on the environment. So as urbanization increases, there's also going to be a huge increase in habitat destruction, habitat simplification, fragmentation, as well as soil compaction, an increase in impervious surfaces, altered hydrology, a decrease in biodiversity, and an increase in human-wildlife conflict. So going through each of these in more detail, starting with habitat destruction, urban expansion requires the destruction of natural habitat to develop on. So when we take away these natural areas, it causes wildlife displacement since there's no longer a suitable environment for these species to inhabit. And it causes improper predator-prey imbalance. So some prey species will lose their resources to avoid predation, such as shelter to hide. And some predators will then no longer be able to occupy a habitat that was once drastically disturbed. So this imbalance in turn disrupts the whole food chain. Habitat destruction also creates unnatural ecological boundaries, making it difficult for some species to inhabit. It also disrupts some species migration patterns. And then additionally, the increase in human presence introduces various disturbances as well, such as pollution, litter, noise and light pollution, and altered resource availability that further can challenge wildlife survival. So what comes with habitat destruction is an increase in impervious surfaces. So here in the greater Houston area, from 1997 to 2016, the urban footprint of Houston increased by 63%. So what that looks like is about the equivalent of 187,000 football fields of impervious surfaces added to the greater Houston area. Impervious surfaces cause issues because they cause runoff rather than infiltration, which causes pollution transport and an increase in flooding, which is a huge issue in Houston. Impervious surfaces also cause hotter urban temperatures with the urban heat island effect, which is defined as urban areas that experience higher temperatures than outlying areas. And this is due to structures like buildings, roads, and other infrastructure that absorb and re-emit the sun's heat more than natural landscapes like forests or water bodies. So heat islands contribute to higher daytime temperatures, reduced nighttime cooling, and higher air pollution levels. So these in turn will contribute to heat-related illnesses such as general discomfort, respiratory issues, heat exhaustion, and even heat stroke for some people. And the heat island effect also negatively impacts wildlife because it makes it difficult for species to adapt to such drastic temperature changes. So this will alter their behavior, their distribution, and ultimately their survival. So one example of this is heat islands have been found to shift egg laying periods of a lot of different native birds, which can be really detrimental to them if it disrupts their migratory patterns and other life history ish. So these figures just show kind of visually what this looks like. So the one over here is just showing how drastically different rural and suburban residential areas are significantly cooler than more downtown commercial areas. So that's the temperature difference average that you'll see. And then this figure here just demonstrates how the urban heat island effect works. So in a more urban area, we have the sun hitting the buildings and the impervious surfaces, and it absorbs more heat. There's less groundwater storage from rainfall, which results in less cooling from evaporation and plant transpiration. Whereas in a more rural area, we have greater groundwater storage of rainfall, less impervious surfaces. So that results in greater cooling from evaporation and plant transpiration, resulting in lower temperatures. So this next slide here just shows too visually what different land cover types we have in the greater Houston area. This is a really cool resource. It's from the National Land Cover Database. So you can view this if you want to explore different land cover types. So as you can see on the map, it's color coded. So the different shades of red represent different developed intensities. The yellows and the browns are agricultural land. So the yellow is pastures and hay fields, whereas the brown are cultivated crop fields. The greens are different forest types. So we have the deciduous forest, evergreen forest, and mixed forest, as you can see up in the northern area. And then the different shades of blue are water and different types of wetlands. And then this map just shows what it looks like when you take away all the man-made land cover types, like the impervious surfaces and the agricultural land cover types, and you're solely looking at green space in Houston. So as you can see, we have the Buffalo Bayou Trail and Memorial Park that are great resources of green space in the downtown area. And then the green space also increases as you go north up into the Piney Woods ecoregion, where we have a lot more green space. So the next issue we see when urban areas do have green spaces, they're unfortunately not always up to par with the needs of wildlife. So looking at this picture right here, what do you all think is wrong with that picture?
Lack of
It's
undergrowth.
too pretty.
It's too pretty.
Not a lot of biodiversity.
Exactly, there's no understory. Mhm. Yeah, so a lot of neighborhoods or urban areas like to eliminate the understory for perceived increase in safety, having that point of view across a wooded area, and also for aesthetic reasons. Because sometimes people will perceive an understory as messy looking. But this is okay for a certain wildlife that's more adapted, like squirrels or certain species of birds. But most wildlife can't utilize this environment due to lack of food, shelter, and resources that the understory provides. So that's the issue that we see a lot with urban wooded areas. And then a lot of times too, many urban and suburban neighborhoods will use ornamental or non-native species for landscaping, which wildlife does not benefit from because they're not adapted to know to utilize the resources from those plants. And they can even hurt biodiversity by spreading invasive species. So species like Chinese tallow, mimosa tree, China berry, Siberian elm are some examples of native or invasive species in Houston that were originally brought in as ornamental or decorative plants that now cause a lot of ecological issues. And then another issue we see in urban areas is biochannelization, which refers to the process of modifying natural waterways by altering their course, their depth, or flow characteristics. So this process is really harmful to the environment because it removes native riparian vegetation, it eliminates habitat and decreases diversity, it eliminates the ability to filter water through native plants. It causes an increase in contaminants and non-point source pollution traveling to rivers in Galveston Bay and then ultimately into the ocean. There's less shade, which results in higher water temperatures and lower dissolved oxygen, making it really hard for anything to survive in this environment. There's an increase in water velocity. So again, nothing can really survive well in it. And it also can be a safety risk to people as well. And then we're going to see a lot more flooding and erosion issues because of that increased water velocity because of how they're constructed. Then next, we see an increase in soil compaction in urban areas. This occurs when the soil structure is compressed, thereby reducing the number and size of pores between spaces in the soil particles. And this is often occurring because of heavy equipment during construction and constant foot or vehicle traffic. Soil compaction is exaggerated when heavy machinery operates on soil when there's high soil moisture because it's more susceptible to compaction due to its resistant ability to resist compression. And this is an issue because less porosity leads to less water percolation in the soil. Compacted soil makes it much more difficult to grow plants. And then we see a result in increase in erosion, which in turn causes more sediments to enter our water bodies, which can harm aquatic wildlife and plant species as well. And then compacted soil also causes higher soil temperatures, which then results in less species of beneficial fungi, bacteria, and other microorganisms that we need in our soil for it to be healthy and productive. And then we also have the issue of habitat fragmentation, which occurs when a continuous area of land is separated, usually by man-made additions like roadways, subdivisions, or other large-scale developments. Habitat fragmentation decreases the size of individual plots of land and will isolate organisms from accessing other parts of their habitats. And this implication of this causes a decrease in biodiversity, genetic risks in wildlife, such as a decrease in gene flow, which is the movement of individuals and the genetic material that they carry from one population to another. So this lack of movement will ultimately result in inbreeding, which will negatively impact the fitness and health of individuals and populations in those fragmented habitats. Habitat fragmentation also increases the edge effect by creating more boundaries or edges of an environment between natural habitats and developed areas. And these edge habitats have much different environmental conditions than the interior of habitats. So think more light, more wind, temperature fluctuations, favoring more generalist species, and often reducing the quality of habitat that more sensitive species needs, which can also lead to a decrease in biodiversity as well. So looking back at this map again, it's just kind of showing what habitat fragmentation and connectivity will look like in like this downtown area of Houston. So as we can see, downtown does do a pretty good job of connecting green space in such an urban area using Buffalo Bayou Trail and Memorial Park. However, beyond that, we do see it's extremely patchy. So that's kind of what that fragmentation looks like at an urban level as well. And a really interesting story about wildlife and their ability to adapt, especially with habitat fragmentation, is the example of the mountain lion called P22. So P22 was born around 2010 in the Santa Monica Mountains in California, and his name derived from a study done by the National Park Service on mountain lions. So P stands for puma, and 22 corresponds to the individual cat being tracked. So sometime around 2012, P22 left the Santa Monica Mountains and set off on a 50-mile journey that took him across two major LA freeways, and he was somehow able to evade traffic, human detection, and eventually found himself setting up in Griffith Park, which is one of the largest urban wilderness parks in the United States, where he set up his range at 8 square miles, which is pretty amazing because a typical male mountain lion's range is 150 square miles. So he had probably the smallest roaming territory of any mountain lion studied in the United States, where he essentially just survived off of deer and other small prey that inhabited the park as well. And P22 became kind of a social media sensation in the area because many residents became really interested and even attached to him, which is an extremely rare reaction of an apex predator inhabiting an urban areas. Most people don't want anything to do with that. And he endured a lot during his 10 years of inhabiting this urban area. So he contracted mange stemming from rat poison, was able to fully recover from that. And he even got himself into trouble because he broke into the LA Zoo and unfortunately hunted and killed a koala. And but fortunately for P22, the zoo opted to make improvements to their enclosures rather than getting a depredation permit against P22, which is also a very rare response. But unfortunately, P22 was eventually found acting very strange. He was sleeping in backyards and preying on much smaller, easier prey like raccoons and small rodents. So he was captured and they discovered he was suffering from injuries of getting hit by a car. And he also contracted a skin parasite from outdoor domestic cats. So it was planned for him to go to a sanctuary, but they found that he was in a lot of unfixable pain. So he was euthanized at 12 years old. But that is considered very old for a mountain lion, and he was one of the oldest mountain lions that the National Park Service had researched. So it was really amazing that he was able to survive that long in such a difficult environment. And the silver lining of this story, and why I like to bring it up, is that his popularity led to gained interest of raising $77 million in state and private donations to build the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Bridge crossing that crosses that 10-lane freeway that P22 traveled. And it will be, I think, the world's largest wildlife crossing bridge when it's finished, which I haven't checked, but I do think it is this year that construction will be finished. And P22 also just helped change the way people see wildlife in a positive way and brought a lot of awareness to urban wildlife and the struggles that they face. So there are many other species of wildlife that do have the same challenges as P22. So wildlife that are considered generalist species tend to do a lot much better in environments than specialist species. And what makes them a generalist species is they're able to thrive off of a wide range of resources, such as varying habitat type. They can survive in a lot of different temperature fluctuations and climates. They have a wide range of diet that they will eat. They can exhibit both nocturnal and diurnal behavior, meaning they can be awake at daytime or nighttime hours, whatever benefits them more, which is beneficial for them to avoid traffic and evading humans. So examples of these species in this area could be coyotes, foxes, raccoons, squirrels, possums, white-tailed deer, grackles, those types of species. So the last implication I want to talk about is human wildlife conflict. So what comes with these generalist species adapting and to urbanization is a decrease. They have a decrease in habitat that supports them. So more and more of these generalist species are coming into these human dominated landscapes, and because they've run out of space to call their own. So this causes a lot of instances where humans and wildlife will start to need to coexist. And with a lot of wildlife, such as birds, their presence is enjoyed and even encouraged. However, there's a lot of species that are considered nuisance, cause conflict, and inhibit a lot of fear in communities, with a primary example being coyotes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about urban coyotes. Coyotes inhabit a lot of urban spaces, and they create territories out of the patchworks of parks and green spaces that cities provide. And they're also able to establish dens in very surprisingly difficult to find places. Urban coyotes usually feed on a natural but diverse diet, not really pets or trash like people typically think they do. They're a beneficial predator to have in urban spaces because they can control wildlife that can be otherwise problematic and doesn't have any other prey species. So deer are a big one that coyotes are able to control. In urban areas, coyotes prefer wooded patches, shrubbery, and they prefer being active during the evening hours where they avoid residential, commercial, and industrial areas if possible, but they will use any remaining habitat fragments and move through those spaces. And that's why we're starting to see an increase in sightings of coyotes, not essentially an increase in coyotes. That's where people kind of get confused with that. And our office is conducting a coyote scat research project to determine what exactly urban coyotes are eating. And this figure just shows how truly opportunistic feeders they are. So they'll eat anything from a wide array of mammals, vegetation, arthropods, sometimes birds, and often some anthropogenic items too, like seed mix or paper products. So the highest percentage that we're seeing in the greater Houston area is hispid cotton rats, rabbits, white-tailed deer, grass, seeds, and paper products. So that's been the dominant diet of the coyotes that we see in this area.
So is that from a like recent study with like urban coyotes, or is that like the standard array of like a normal
It's what we found here in Houston. So this is just everything that our samples have found on this figure. And then within these, everything that we found, the highest percentage of what they're eating is the raccoon, rats, deer, grass seeds, and paper products. And then I wanted to also point out too that cat is the lowest percentage of diet at only 1%. So, and with that 1%, it is likely that that was a roadkill cat that the coyote ate, rather than one hunting a cat, because cats are very smart and very agile. So the energy that a coyote would need to exert to hunt a cat would be a lot versus a rabbit or a deer fawn. So that's something I like to point out too as well.
Is the paper, are they actually eating paper or are they like food stuff that's in paper wrap?
Yeah, it's like trash sometimes that they get into. So that's where the paper product probably comes from. And then this is what a sample looks like of the scat that we process. So once we get all the like organic matter out and we just have like bones and fur left, we can use the size of the bones and then the fur that wasn't digested to determine what the species was that was eaten. So based on the size of the vertebrae and the paws and the nails and the fur color, we were able to determine that that was a hispid cotton rat. So that's kind of how that process works. So then with this conflict, we have a lot of issues with people wanting to know how to manage coyotes in urban spaces. And a lot of times people want to opt for hunting or euthanizing coyotes as a way to remove them from the landscape. And this doesn't work, and it's mostly because coyotes have a very highly organized social system, even in urban areas. So they'll have packs or groups of coyotes that they'll defend territories from other packs. So a lot of times people think because they hunt or feed on solitary or in pairs that they're not pack animals, but they actually are, and they have the alpha male and female pair, as well as a few other coyotes that make up a pack. Group size in habitats is typically 5 to 6 adults, with additional pups born that year. And then territories will have little to no overlap, so coyotes defend these territories pretty aggressively. And the size of the territory depends on the habitat type and the resource availability. So typically 4 to 15 square miles is what a typical territory will look like for a coyote. So because with the conflict that they have, like I said, people opt to want to kill the coyotes as a way to manage them. And this doesn't work because of this social system. So as you can see from this figure, how their reproduction typically works is in a stable pack, only the alpha pair are going to reproduce. And when they're in a stable environment, they're going to have pretty small litter sizes because they reproduce based on the need to protect and maintain the pack. So in a stable pack, you may see 3 pups born per year and the rest of the pack will not reproduce. Say someone decides to hunt and kill the coyotes on the property to remove the pack from that area, and they kill 6 coyotes, one of which is an alpha pair. The pack then needs to hurry up and maintain their population size so that they can maintain that territory from other coyote packs in the area. So they're going to bring in a new alpha pair, and the rest of the pack will also begin reproducing, and they can control their litter size too. So they're going to have a lot more pups that year. So that person who opted to kill the coyotes, who once had pretty low amount of coyotes, is now quadrupling the amount of coyotes because of that. So the real solution is to almost train the coyotes in a way. They're very similar to dogs in that sense, where if you haze them or scare them, they do learn to avoid certain areas. And they're also able, say there's one coyote that gets a little bit too close to your property. If you do the proper hazing techniques against that coyote, it's somehow able to go back to the pack and communicate with the rest of the pack that this is not a safe environment. We need to find resources elsewhere. So ways to do this are, first, you want to remove what could be attracting coyotes in the first place. So if you have pet food outside, loose trash, if you're feeding other wildlife, so bird seed often attracts coyotes, look into those things. And then keeping smaller pets inside, because although they don't normally go for those smaller pets, they might spark an interest in the coyote seeing smaller animals around. And then when you do see a coyote, those hazing techniques could include using things like air horns, slapping pots and pans together, yelling at them. You can spray them with the hose. You can throw small pebbles at them or non-lethal objects or tennis balls at them, anything to scare them and make them uncomfortable. So the next species we have a lot of conflict with in urban areas are deer. So deer are highly reproductive. One interesting thing about deer is that they're the most common species known to have 70% of all their pregnancies result in twins because they naturally ovulate 2 eggs simultaneously. And similar to coyotes, deer need a lot of space to roam. They have high movement rates. So habitat loss and fragmentation does push them into these urban spaces a lot of the times. And deer have very few natural predators, especially in urban areas. So population control is very difficult, especially too, because in urban areas, there's lots of hunting regulations. So hunting can't sustain either for the lack of predators. So they kind of breed and expand almost exponentially in urban areas because of this. And deer often thrive in urban areas because a lot of homes will provide supplemental feeding for them, either directly through people that like to feed the deer or indirectly through landscaping. And then this causes a lot of conflict because of landscape destruction, car collisions, damage to the landscape because of erosion from excessive grazing on the land, and then unhealthy herd populations because there's so many of them in close proximity that there is an increase in parasite spread and disease spread as well. So the best solution for that is to create feeding ordinances. So having people stop feeding the deer and bringing them in close contact in these urban areas. Using deterrents similar to those as coyotes, so you can haze the deer as well to get them away. And then try to opt for landscaping that deer don't typically eat. So there's a lot of resources on deer-proof plants where if they have other resources, they won't go for those plants to help protect your landscaping. So those are what we recommend for deer management. And then the last urban wildlife species that has found a way to utilize urban spaces are bats. And bats usually get a label of being a nuisance or threatening as well due to lack of knowledge. And that's because they inhibit a lot of fear in people due to their association with Halloween, their reputation for being disease spreaders. And then their somewhat sporadic movement that they have can also make people fearful. And a lot of times bats do end up roosting or getting trapped in houses or businesses or other man-made structures because they're actually very adaptable as well. And a lot of man-made structures like bridges, for example, replicate caves or other natural habitats that they once utilized because in the bridges, the crevices that they go into have really good climate control. So they maintain that kind of hot muggy temperature that they need to survive. But bats are actually really great to have around. They save agricultural workers millions of dollars annually from moth consumption. And some of the species are pollinators as well. So they're a really important species to have, especially in urban areas. So with reducing conflict with bats, we always recommend to ensure your house or any building that you're occupying is completely sealed off so that bats can't enter. And if they do, taking the proper measures to evict them. So making sure you understand if they migrate or if they overwinter, and usually hiring someone who has the proper licensing to know their life cycle to properly evict the bat so that you're not sealing in any pups or mothers when they go out for the night. And Bat Conservation International has a lot of really great resources on coexisting with bats as well, if you're interested in learning more about that. And they also have resources on bat houses if you do want to help promote bats in your area. And then if you're interested in doing volunteer work with bats, you can consider joining either the Houston, or it might be more beneficial for you all to join the Huntsville bat team, where they do weekly bat chats at the Huntsville prison or the Wabridge colony in Houston if you're closer to that. So feel free to talk to me later about that if you're interested in those opportunities. So moving away from the environment, urbanization also has a lot of negative implications to human health as well. So such as poor diet, poor access to safe drinking water, pollution-related health conditions, an increase in injuries, decrease in mobility, decline in mental health, and then the heat island effect, like we talked about earlier. So promoting green space in urban areas has been found to be a successful solution to mitigate these issues that I just discussed, as well as helping benefit humans who live in the city as well. So urban green space offers a variety of ecosystem services with the three main categories that will cover environmental services, human health services, as well as economic services. So starting with the human benefits of urban green space, globally, obesity and mental illness are affecting populations in an increasingly urbanized world. However, urban planning interventions can take place with the implementation of urban green space to combat these issues. Urban green space has been found to provide opportunities for physical activity such as walking, running, biking, and other forms of exercise that can help combat sedentary lifestyles and improve people's health. Parks and green space often serve as gathering places for the community, so facilitating social interaction, creating a sense of belonging, and can help combat loneliness and improve mental well-being in people in cities. And then spending time in green space has also been found to improve mental health. So in decreasing symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress, and enhancing mood and boosting people's cognitive functions. So that's why we really want urban green space for the human benefits. For biodiversity, as I stated earlier, urbanization has caused a lot of issues for biodiversity around the world. So implementing urban green space can mitigate these rapid population declines by providing suitable habitat for a wide array of biodiversity, from plants to animals, birds, reptiles. They can all benefit in urban spaces. And this will provide access through migration corridors. So this allows species to move from one larger natural plot of land to another, which also ultimately helps with that issue of genetic diversity and population resilience that we talked about. And then there's also opportunity for more plant diversity, which in turn will attract pollinators. So this will help sustain our pollinator species, which will benefit us as well. And a key example of this comes from the research I did in grad school looking at red fox occupancy. So I was looking at different land cover types in urban spaces that foxes prefer to occupy. And one of the highest percentage of land cover use that foxes use in urban spaces was that open green space. So think like parks, cemeteries, things like that. And this is shown with this linear regression model that I made. So as you can see, occupancy or fox presence increases as the open green space availability increases. So we really want to keep doing that for not only foxes, but a lot of other urban wildlife as well. Urban green space also has been found to improve environmental and climate health by reducing the urban heat island effect, cooling down cities in hot weather, and offsetting greenhouse gas emissions through carbon sequestration, improving air quality through phytoremediation and effective stormwater management. So this is an example here of a project I did in one of my previous positions, where we would replace abandoned houses with rain gardens in a neighborhood that experienced a lot of flooding issues. And so once these were established, the flooding went down a lot in those neighborhoods because this took in a lot more water. And the neighborhood also just benefited from it as well because it was a lot more attractive than an abandoned house, and we saw a lot of pollinator species using it, and wildlife would use it. So doing things like that as well in urban areas can make a huge difference, and this project can be replicated anywhere. And then we also see economic benefits of urban green space. So in places that have more urban green space, we see an increase in property value, a reduction in energy costs, and it promotes tourism as well. So like in Houston, Waugh Bridge brings a lot of people, Buffalo Bayou, Memorial Park, Herman Park. And we actually document all the visitors that come to Waugh Bridge at our weekly bat chats. And we've had visitors from almost every continent, and they've known about Waugh Bridge in those different countries. So it is pretty amazing what these green spaces and natural resources can attract for visitors. And then in turn, they go out and support local businesses after they watch the Bat Chat. So it's a really great resource to have. So there are improvements that can be made with green space when it comes to unequal accessibility to it. So we do still see the effects of redlining that took place in the 1930s in these neighborhoods today. They still are some of the hottest parts of cities in the summertime, having little green space, and they have the abundance of heat trapping pavement. And neighborhoods that weren't redlined tend to be much cooler due to having more green space availability. But there are several initiatives underway to improve urban green space accessibility. So this was another project I did in one of my previous positions where we connected a bunch of neighborhoods along the Rouge River in Detroit, along a trail system to promote that green space accessibility. And then here in Houston, the Sims and Greens Bayou Greenway project also has connected multiple neighborhoods, giving residents access to green space. So I bring this up because it's important when we're doing conservation and restoration work to not forget about these areas and maybe even prioritize them as well too, if possible. Okay, so now that we discussed all the negative impacts of urbanization, I probably made you all depressed. We can talk about what we can do about this to combat it. So the last slides are going to cover how we can promote green space in urban areas as a city, all the way down to what individuals can do. So one of the biggest things that conservation the biggest conservation strategy to preserve green space is land acquisition, or this is a strategy when an entity or a person will buy property to assure that it will be protecting that natural habitat and prevent future development. So an example of this is that Sims and Greens Bayou project that formed a private-public partnership between Houston Parks Board, the City of Houston, and the Parks and Recreation Department, as well as Harris County Flood Control. And it transformed 3,000 acres of underutilized land along 9 major waterways, and it's going to create, I think, 150-mile network of parks and trails along these bayou systems. And Houston Parks and Rec has acquired 882 acres of land as part of this initiative, which will also be preserved as green space. So just trying to promote more things like that in our urban areas will be really great to combat urbanization. And then one issue we do see with land acquisition is funding and cost. It's very expensive to buy land in general. And then when we're looking at what land to buy as conservationists, we'll see on like an example on this map, that plot of land up there, and then that plot of land that the arrow is pointing to, that very tiny piece of land, are unfortunately the same cost. So when you're looking at that, sometimes your first thought will be, well, let's conserve more land because we'll protect more. But we do want to still spend the money on these smaller plots of land in urban areas too, because it's like we've talked about, it's as equally as important to conserve the urban green space as well as these large plots of lands in more urban areas. So urban planning techniques can also be used in cities to combat this issue. So we can do a lot of small scale things, which if they're done in mass can make a huge difference. So planting things like green walls, like you see on this building, will help a lot, and they actually will insulate buildings too. So this can help save money with energy costs. You can plant pollinator gardens on roofs of buildings like that picture up there. So just being creative with how you use this small amount of space that you have in cities. You can use more porous surfaces in parking lots, like this material right here, to help with the issues with impervious surfaces. And even really small things like designing walkways that maybe incorporate green space, but not fully, can still make a difference if they're done in mass. And then talking about other issues we have in urban areas, preventing bird collisions can help a lot in urban spaces because that's a serious threat to birds that migrate through cities and are one of the leading causes of their population declines. So an easy way to combat this is to install these visual deterrents on windows so that birds don't mistakenly fly into them. So as you can see from all these pictures, there's lots of different design options that you can use depending on what you prefer. So it can be very simple, like these little dots. You can put stripes down your windows. This building right here is actually more of a curtain with hanging bungee cords. So you can use things like that. Or if you're unable to install these kind of more permanent things, you can use more temporary solutions like keeping your blinds down but in the open setting, so you'll still get the light in, but the blinds will be visual to the birds. You can also put in little window decals or install curtains or shades to help with that. And the Audubon has a lot of resources on where you can buy these things or other ideas as well if you're interested in learning more about that. And then another way to decrease negative impacts of urbanization are to plant native plants. Native plants are ideal for landscaping because they're adapted to the region's growing conditions and climate. Wildlife is more familiar with these plants and can better utilize them. They're more resistant to disease and insect damage, and they'll require a lot less maintenance and less water. So it'll save you time and money by picking these plants versus ornamental non-native plants. And you can find a native plant list for landscaping in the greater Houston area from the Native Plant Society of Texas. That's an excellent resource. The city of Houston also has a really great native tree list. And then there's lots of local nurseries that sell native plants as well. So prioritizing that when you do your landscaping work. And then to coincide with planting native, a little bit more extreme, but you can consider getting rid of your grass lawn. Grass lawns have little to no ecological value. So by getting rid of them and replacing them with native plants, you promote pollinator species and provide habitat for a lot of wildlife. And as I stated earlier, planting native requires a lot less maintenance, so you won't have to do so much landscaping work, which will reduce the negative impacts of lawn mowers and other landscaping machineries on the environment as well. And there's a lot of different design options you can opt for. So a lot of times HOAs may not be okay with something as extreme as this picture, but you could consider something like this where maybe you don't get rid of all of the grass, but you can make something more uniform and organized, and more aesthetically pleasing, like designing it like that. So just being creative with how you reduce your lawn size could be really beneficial. And then if you live somewhere where you have more of a forested backyard, consider preserving or replanting layers of the woodland. So like we discussed earlier, getting rid of the understory is really detrimental to wildlife. So we want to promote vertical stratification or the vertical layering of habitat based on different heights of vegetation, because the bottom 2/3 of forested habitat are not only the most diverse in plants, but wildlife. And this is where the most seeds, berries, nectar, things like that are found that benefit wildlife. And they'll tend to be more stable ecosystems. So trying to rebuild that if possible would be really helpful. And then looking at shoreline naturalization, that's a vital step to help combat the implications of bayou stabilization and other altered hydrology. So it will help provide stormwater management by slowing down the water flow rates. It'll remove pollution by removal through native plants, through absorbing and breaking down those pollutants through phytoremediation. It will be more of erosion control through plants offering that bank stabilization, And then the increase in vegetation will also provide habitat for a diverse range of aquatic and terrestrial species, such as the alligator snapping turtle in that picture right there, which they're currently facing a lot of threats due to poaching and habitat loss, but they're pretty prominent in the Houston area, so helping those types of species as well. And then we can also consider establishing wildlife-friendly fencing to minimize habitat fragmentation on the individual level. So doing something like this where you have more of a tree line instead of a typical chain link fence or something like that will help allow for easy movement over the fencing or through it. It's made with materials that don't have a risk of animals getting stuck in it, so they can easily move through your yard. And you can opt for fencing that could be like berry producing, so the animals can also utilize it for food and shelter if possible. And then if you do need to enclose an area of your yard, because if you have a dog or kids, try to just opt for the least amount of space as possible so that it offers the least amount of detours for traveling wildlife. And then looking at wildlife corridors, we want to connect green spaces. So it's really important for wildlife and their movement, as I've emphasized with coyotes, deer, and P22. So wildlife bridges are a huge solution to combat this issue of habitat fragmentation and connect green spaces. So this is an example in Memorial Park of a wildlife crossing. And we've seen with University of Houston has put up cameras to see if it's being used or not. And there's a lot of wildlife that has learned really quickly to use the bridge versus crossing the street. So with this increase in development, we really want to push for including these in our roadways when we expand. And then this is what the bridge that P22 inspired will look like and some of the wildlife that it will support. So you'll see everything from mountain lions, coyotes, and deer, all the way down to the small lizards and bats using it. So it really will benefit all wildlife. So it's a great addition to have in our cities. So that wraps up my presentation on urban systems. So we take any questions now. Yeah.
Are you still doing, I think last year you presented at the chapter meeting, something about wildlife cameras and golf courses? Are you still doing that program?
Yeah, so this past month I was working with, it's called the Urban Wildlife Information Network, which looks at urban wildlife. So all these partners within the organization set up camera trap transects and will collect data on urban wildlife, and then it's shared in a shared database. And then we have like smaller projects with the organization. So this past year was the first year in Houston where we were looking at golf courses and how urban wildlife utilizes golf courses to see if that could be something that we want to look into as partnering with golf courses to promote wildlife. So yeah, we did find, I went through my camera trap data and mostly generalist species, but there were some really cool like screech owls were in the golf courses, and lots of different wildlife. So yeah, I can talk more about that later in the summer if anyone wants to volunteer with that.
What was the bridge that you mentioned with regard to the bats, I guess in Houston? Was it Chatsall?
Wall-bridge. So
Oh, W-A-U-G-H. Okay, the
yeah.
road one.
Mhm.
Okay.
But there's lots of bat bridges. So
Mhm.
with one of the programs with Texas Parks and Wildlife, the Texas Nature Tracker program, I partnered with them to do bridge surveys in the greater Houston area. So we're looking at all the bridges in Houston that TxDOT manages. And we found just from 2 surveys so far, like I think close to 30 bridges in the greater Houston area that have bats, and we'll probably see an increase as we keep doing those surveys. So it's really cool.
Where is the wildlife bridge you showed?
The Memorial Park one. That's in Memorial Park in downtown, I think off of Allen Road. So it's right in the heart of downtown in Memorial Park.
What road is going through there, do you know?
I think it's Allen
I
Parkway.
think as you exit downtown, like if you were headed to Memorial, you know, pretty well inside the loop. So before you get,
So
To that
it's,
loose
so
edge, closer
you're
to
heading
downtown.
on Allen Parkway when you see that bridge.
Mhm.
You're not on I-45.
oh, no,
No.
you gotta do the exit off and then,
Okay,
it sounded like you were gonna go out to the loop that.
okay.
It's on Memorial Parkway, about 3 miles east of the Galleria.
Okay, so it's Memorial Parkway that we were seeing.
I remember they all
Under the
kind of
bridge,
start
under the-
be splitting off
Okay,
there.
thank you.
There's no which road on
Before
mine.
that weird split off.
Okay, so it's Memorial Parkway.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna go check it out.
You should. You can walk it too. So
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, you can drive under it and then park your car, and then the trail system at Memorial Park allows for you to go walk over it.
So the wildlife bridge is part of Memorial Parkway, so if I park at Memorial Parkway, I can walk over that
Mhm.
bridge?
Yeah,
Or, I mean, if I go to Memorial Park,
correct.
I can cross
Mhm.
that bridge, okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
Thank
just
you.
want to make a plug. One of our classes later in the year is going to Huntsville to see the bats come out of the Huntsville old warehouse. It's a phenomenal experience. I highly recommend everybody do.
You should. Yeah.
Are you using drones at all for tracking wildlife, particularly coyotes? Because I have a friend who is tracking some. And it's amazing how far their den is from their actual, like, if they're in your neighborhood, their den might be 2 miles away, and
Mhm.
it's exceedingly. You know, I'm just like, that would be a cool project.
I'd love to. I haven't used drones. There's a lot of hoops you have to go through with the state to have the license to
Yeah.
operate the drone, but I do know, I think other programs use it for other research, but yeah, we haven't done that in Houston yet, but that is a really cool way to monitor wildlife. Yeah.
So I think like all the coyotes like, in Galveston, so it's down by Sea Isle, I think it's just, where's is the preserve or whatever, but they all have collars.
Yeah.
Cause we see them like walking on our street and stuff,
Mhm.
and so those might be easy to track, cause I mean, everybody's always put that, it's interesting about the cats, because everybody said, hey, coyotes are on such and such street, get your cats in, or
Mhm.
make sure your little dog's on a leash.
Mhm.
Like, no, they're eating all the bunnies in my front yard, which is good.
Yeah.
But, so those, they might be able to easily, because they all have their little trackers on, walking around.
Yeah, those coyotes, so that's actually a part of a project because we found that the coyotes in Galveston have red wolf DNA in them. So they the city, I think animal control there was able to put the collars on some of those so that they could learn more about them. So I think um there's a university in Michigan that's researching them. I think it's North Michigan Tech, and then whatever the university in Boston is, I'm blanking on that.
Their range is pretty far, because that's if you're from, if you go all the way down the seawall past the state park.
Mhm.
We know they've been seen off of 61st, there's the Randall's grocery store there, and there's a huge field, they'll be back there.
Yeah, I
So
think
I don't know how many miles that is, it's a lot.
there was one coyote that they tracked that was almost to Austin, which is amazing that was definitely an outlier, but if they want to, they can travel very far, which is really cool. Any other questions?
So sorry, you say that they have a ADN of a wolf in coyote?
The red wolf DNA has been found in some of the coyotes in the Galveston area.
And you think that it could be also probably in dogs?
Yeah, they have domestic dog and red wolf DNA, so that's something that they're looking more into to see.
I think they have ghost wolves, if you look that up.
Yeah.
They have an organization Galveston.
Exactly. It's really interesting though.
Yeah,
So.
Do they have a similar amount of chromosomes?
I'm not too sure. I haven't looked into the genetic side of it too much, but they do DNA sampling. I forgot what method that they used to, I think it was they drew blood and then where they were able to somehow differentiate the different percentages of coyote, red wolf, and domestic dog. And it kind of ranged what the distribution was, but they had the presence of red wolf DNA, which was really cool. Mhm. Any other questions?
What we can do to help to push for some to improve
Mhm.
our cohabitation with with our poor academy.
Yeah, so just doing things on the individual level by helping promote habitat connectivity and habitat resources for these species. And then if you have opportunity to speak up for the more larger scale development projects, putting in your opinions and your thoughts about like in town hall meetings or things like that, speaking up for things like the wildlife crossing bridges or development projects, making just sharing your voice for speaking up for wildlife in that sense for the larger projects is definitely some great ways to help.
I will say, one of my old neighbors, and she's a great friend of mine, she has the mentality of, I have these chickens, I'm gonna protect these chickens, and I'm gonna kill these coyotes and kill these fox. And so I constantly seen myself in a battle with my friend about, I wanna speak up for the wildlife, but I don't wanna disagree with my friend. And so, finding a balance of how to talk to your friends and neighbors and things like that about not just killing things because you're trying to protect your property, but living with them and coexisting.
Mhm.
It's a hard conversation, but I think it's our responsibility to do it.
Exactly.
I did notice when they were killing things off, other species would come in. And so, yeah, you got rid of these critters, but now you have raccoons that have just demolished your chickens. So
That's what I've told people. I'm like, killing something, you're just putting up a vacancy sign.
Exactly.
Everything else is just gonna fill that spot.
It's called, I think, the vacuum effect
Yeah,
where
the best thing to do is be responsible. And reinforce your, cause I have.
predator will move in.
exactly.
off, the rest of them get more pestery.
Mhm.
They start pushing out.
Yeah, they did. I mean, raccoons just demolished her birds. And I was like, well, you took out the apex predator, so that's what happened.
It'll just be a constant battle. So maybe trying to preface it with more educating on wildlife behavior versus just fighting opinions. That's a great way to make a change as well. So thank
There's a
you
lot
for
of
bringing that
people
up.
to like snakes, and things like that, so it's hard to sometimes communicate, because you hit a phobia, something.
Right.
You try to complain about, if you kill that snake, then you have rats,
Right.
and then they're afraid of that too, so then it's like a.
Well, then you put the rat poison down. Okay, well, now you just killed the birds.
Yeah, exactly. You get like a bird.
So everything that we do has an impact.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely educating neighbors and family and friends is a great way to help as well.
So what support do you have about government and regulators to increase these areas?
So with development, that is kind of tricky, especially with Texas. Texas is very supportive of the landowner. So as long as someone, if they buy the property, they can do whatever they want with it. And like Parks and Wildlife, we can't say, no, you can't. Like we don't have the authority to do that unless, I mean, if there are like protected species, they do have to do their due diligence with that. But other than that, like there isn't much, because a lot of people think like, oh, you're Parks and Wildlife, go tell them no. And it's like, we can't do that. So
I don't know how they would know if there are protected species in some of these places when they just come in and clear cut everything.
they do have to do like due diligence surveys and like wetland surveys and things like that. So they do have to do that in order to be able to develop. they are pretty laxed in a lot of instances, but
Who checks that they did
a lot of consulting companies, so they have to partner, usually with private firms will come out and write reports for them, and then that report is required to do the development, so. But yeah, there has been times where there's been like eagle nests or things where they have to do a big buffer, and develop pretty much around that buffer, so. They do have to work a little bit with the wildlife, but not always
When you
enough.
say they, you mean, is this a state requirement? Is it county? Is it?
Be either state or federal, so they have to follow like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Endangered Species Act, clean water, like there's a lot of different regulations that they have to be in conform with, so. conform to.
The big one most recently, what is it, the waters of the US, which is gonna really be important for here about protection of rivers and wetlands.
Mhm.
Yeah, the developers are gonna find a way to say, oh, you're not protecting that far upstream. So that's a key one.
Mhm.
That's, and I don't know what's happened in the last 2 months, but it was supposed to be a major change. That
Mhm.
was gonna open up wetlands for development.
Yeah, so.
Well, they've been fighting what the definition is for 3 or
Mhm.
4 years now,
Yeah.
and so it's somewhat falling on the states to define
Mhm.
if they wanna do their own wetland regulations that are more strict than the federal government.
Yeah.
So that's where you're seeing a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And some of the states are like, yeah, absolutely, I was looking up a state the other day where they just passed a wetland regulation like a year ago. Cause they said, we're gonna protect
It was
this.
stricter, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's where you kind of have that balance. But yeah, and there's local regulations too, so you've got 3 levels.
Part of the problem is that often the only penalty is a fine. And the developers will go ahead and destroy it and accept the fine because they're making more money. I've seen that happen often. They'll go ahead and destroy it and pay the fine because they're making more money. It's just part of their cost.
Right, yeah, so there's
It's part of their
definitely
cost.
a lot of issues with those loopholes that
Right.
they can get away with, which is frustrating.
It is. What is your next project? Do you move around to do different projects?
Yeah, it kind of is based on like what comes to us, so, my big projects that I'm working on right now are the bridge surveys with TxDOT to survey all the bridges in the greater Houston area to see where the bat colonies are around, and then helping to make better bridge management strategies for TxDOT so that we can coexist with bats in that way. That project that I was just talking about with the camera traps, that'll be this summer, doing a second year of that. And then I do a lot of work with neighborhoods that have rookeries or big congregation of birds that cause a lot of conflict, so helping them deter the birds in a legal way, because again, they have to follow the Migratory Bird Treaty Act with that, so helping with conflict with that. So there's a couple neighborhoods that I'll be helping to minimize those project problems with. But yeah, those are some of the examples.
Why don't they want? Don't worry, please.
Why don't,
They want to hurry. It's love to go out here, so just live and I'll live.
it's actually, it is pretty bad, like, cause think about having like hundreds to 200 birds all over your house, and then they like poop everywhere, and it's like you can't see your sidewalk, it's that thick, and then the babies, they compete with each other, so then there's dead baby birds everywhere, and it's pretty bad. Like I feel for them because it definitely, like one neighborhood, their mail service wouldn't come. It was that disgusting. So it's pretty problematic, but
So you just like develop maybe an area of their neighborhood that would make, maybe the birds would concentrate.
we try, usually what happens is we'll help one neighbor a subdivision. And then the birds will hop to the next subdivision, and then that subdivision will call us and we'll go there. And then it's just a never ending cycle, but
What species of bird?
usually like herons, so like cattle egrets, those types of short like water birds. So they'll typically form in neighborhoods that have tree canopies that are near water. And so not clearing the canopies, but kind of separating the canopy helps. And then doing those hazing techniques to get them to go with.
Right over there by where our chapter meeting was, or is, I guess, gonna be, the north end of that lake it's a giant mess over there. I walked over there, I used to fish there when I was a kid.
Mm.
And I walked over there that night of our chapter meeting, and it's just covered in birds and bird feces, and it smells, and it's
Mhm.
really nasty.
Yeah,
Yeah, on the other end of the park lot, straight out of the library. Coming north on the top part of that lake, you know, how the water in the middle.
They're not natural predators, those birds?
not really.
That's the problem, right? So the population's getting out of control.
Yeah, and we've just destroyed so much of that shoreline like habitat that they need. So it's like, well, where do they go? So it's
Wow, the trees were white with feces.
who was that?
Did you want to go into the next one?
Yeah,
Maybe 5 minute break.
break, and then you
Yeah.
can do the next one. Sure.
We'll take a 5-minute break. She's gonna get set up for the next topic.
The bathroom, you know, the bath thing. It'll go around. 5 minutes later. Oh my God.
Issue is like the rotary guano is, because I know pigeon is hazardous waste. So I used to work at a place where it was like, we didn't like pigeon there because hazardous waste. Yeah, issue with that. Like that, some of these rotary or.
I'm not sure with like the whole idea of like it being hazardous waste or not. I know it definitely is that a level of concern. Yeah. Just don't watch it. Okay.
The information.
That blew me away. Yeah, I'm not sure like the neighborhood. It's hard to tell like if there's any like regulations on
See how that was all.
how much of that could
Yes.
like has, yeah, because I know that the city involvement with the land that I was dealing with, they didn't really have anything to say about that.
I go out there.
Probably.
Yeah, last Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering who you did your.
David Drake.
Okay. I just work with Bill Thompson. But I went back to Ecology department where. Yeah.
Yeah, David was in
Forestry.
Forest and Wildlife.
I don't know how. So I did my grad work. UW.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just chemistry stuff. Chemistry. So I was over in the tall building.
She's catching by the hand right now.
No, fortunately. I'm sure yours were there.
2022 to
Walk an hour. Oh, fairly recent.
Yeah.
Get back. I did mine. My car was. 2008. So we must have found it.
I miss it.
It is, nice to not be in the cold all the time, but
Yeah.
it's a great.
Big summer in Madison. That would be, I would do it forever.
Oh, yeah.
So nice.
The years I was there is was that? Didn't even know what 90. So why did you? Are you from Wisconsin originally or?
I'm from Michigan.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just went there.
And we're 2 miles. I found another one.
That's 20 bucks to take it.
So I'm sure this is anything you're running. They're that area. I found a backbone there. Just down the road from us. Ridge all over County Creek. You drove those piles of,
What was the intersection of it?
on the last street. It's going over, Candy Creek.
For Candy Creek. Yeah, I'll see if that's on the database. You have like a. I see it, I still have it.
I'm starting to see a little bit of litter out there. I never saw it. I've been hiking it the last couple of years. I go out there. So, I got the bird out of Merlin. Yeah, you can smell it before you got in here.
Yeah.
Sometimes with my dog, sometimes my wife.
Yeah, we have like
Yeah.
all these bridges to serve it. And then the green dots are the ones that have been visited, but.
Thanks.
I probably would.
Yeah, financially strong.
Yeah. You know, check it out.
Sorry. Partially in the woods. Actually, very nice. We may have some more populations. Here.
Really? I know.
San Jacinto.
Hopefully this is the last weekend of the cold.
Is it?
I've been
I
calling
hope.
for a
Oh,
while.
I hope so too.
But I've had it last until March.
They have more.
Yeah.
Water. One and a half times bigger than the other coyotes, the whiter ones, long sheep coyotes. They've been hunting robots. We had.
Warmer again on Monday.
Yeah, first of all, to be in the 70s next week, so.
DNA test.
Yeah.
Yeah. You take all the covers off.
I noticed this one. There's 2 days in between.
One.
Put it back
Twice the
on.
size of the coyote. Here's a different.
Actually, we're looking for the people searching it.
Good.
Direct, like, or like. This is like Liberty House. But, like, it's already curious.
They typically use the same sectors as.
You don't even have to do it in the plan.
Not that far off.
So then these.
There's actually,
Yeah.
this was one of those interesting. They pulled a flathead catfish. 50-pound catfish. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to get them. It's been a little hard. I've just. Like I go out there with all the equipment, sit out there for a day or two. Like I go out there on a hike and then. What's it called? All areas, they actually follow these tracks.
That's her.
Yeah, 5.
Okay, getting back.
That's amazing. Cool.
Yes, I originally had you going to 11:45, but I know just right now it's 10 hours, so.
Make this pretty quick. This is a small one, so.
I wanted to, they really enjoying your presentation.
Yeah.
But you had the back here.
Yeah, I'll try to move them, but this one's a little quicker anyway, so.
But they're really enjoying it. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get started with the second half of Addis's presentation. He said it's very interactive, so hold on.
Yeah, so let's get into laws and ethics now. So this will essentially cover the ethics relating to conservation and wildlife, how to begin thinking about your personal ethic towards conservation and developing that, and then getting into some wildlife laws, the history behind some of them, and then some important current ones that we have. And then this is a shorter presentation, but it does have some interactive parts, so it's kind of as long or as short as we want to make it. So to begin, what exactly is an ethic? An ethic is defined as rules or of behavior that is based on ideas on what's morally good or bad. So they're often applied to questions of correct behavior within a specific context or an activity. So when you think about a personal ethic, that's your belief about what's right and wrong based on your own personal values. You can have professional ethics, so that's standards of behavior expected in a profession. So think like medical ethics or environmental ethics. And then social ethics are values that influence societies, how society should function, often relating to justice, equality, or social rights or human rights. So in environmental or wildlife work, ethics could involve principles like sustainability, conservation, respect for ecosystems, and consideration of human impact on the natural world. So when I started my master's program in environmental conservation, the first discussion that we had was about ethics. What is an ethic? How could we define our own? So to help guide that conversation, we looked at Aldo Leopold's land ethic from a Sand County almanac. And his writing really shifts the way we think about ethics. So he argues that ethics shouldn't just govern human relationships, but should extend to the land itself. So looking at soils, waters, plants, and animals. And he challenges the idea that we're separate from nature and instead proposes that we are part of an ecological community, not conquerors or owners of it. So a few takeaways from this reading that really resonate with me and we talked a lot about in that program, where he said that ethical land use should prioritize the health and integrity of the land rather than just the economic gain, and that conservation isn't about using resources wisely, it's about ensuring the long-term stability of natural systems. And that land is a living system. It's not just property to be owned or managed, but a network of interdependent life forms that function together. So a true land ethic will change the way we act. So Leopold said, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of a biotic community, and it is wrong when it tends otherwise. So his message is just as relevant today as when he wrote it. So the question for us is, how do we apply this ethic in our own conservation work? So to start thinking about ethics and how you think about certain situations or ideas, I'm going to go through some pictures and give just a brief description of what the picture is. And you have to tell me what you think about it, if it's okay or not. And I'll give you some considerations, but I'm not going to give you any thoughts or opinions as a biologist on these things. So it's not really meant to like change anyone's views or upset anybody. It's just considerations on how we think of certain conservation issues. So to get started, is this okay? Yes or no? So things you want to consider with this. Disease spread. See, these 3 deer are very close together. There's chronic wasting disease. Like that's a key way of how that disease is spread. Unhealthy diet. We can also think of urbanization, though. They're losing their food resources. So is supplemental feeding okay in that context? And then we could think about hunting. So what if this is the only way someone's able to eat? And they have to rely on these deer, and this is the only way they can ensure a harvest. So thinking about things like that. And then what about the implications of putting corn out and the impacts on other wildlife? So the corn, when it gets wet, it grows bacteria, and if birds eat it, could impact them. So that's kind of a way to think about that issue. What about this? So we have a bird feeder in it. Is that okay?
Is it over the water? Is that a water?
Mhm.
I'm not sure what I'm looking at.
So it's just a bird feeder that we're looking at. So one interesting thing is I noticed a lot of people nodded that feeding birds is okay, but feeding deer isn't. So is it the same? Is feeding birds better than feeding deer? So a lot of people prefer feeding birds because there's less of a issue that they can cause. They're not overpopulated like deer. But what about like we still see avian influenza being spread through bird feeders, or issues with people not cleaning bird feeders well that could harm them. So thinking about it in that context, but then again, birds are losing a lot of resources too. So if it's done properly, is that supplemental feeding okay? What to do instead? You know, this picture shows a lot of natural resources. So you have a water source for them, plants and pollinator species to provide food. Is that the better option? So just to kind of start thinking about scenarios like this, how can they contradict each other in a way sometimes without even thinking about it? Things like that. So here's the next picture. So for context, this is a Muscovy duck and they're not native here. Are they okay to be in our local ponds still?
When they're
They
migrating.
migrate, yeah.
A lot of times they don't.
They stay in.
Yeah. So they have been found to outcompete a lot of native wildlife. Is it ethical to euthanize them to protect the native species, even though it's our fault that they're here in the first place?
Are we importing them? Are they coming naturally? Why are they here? I
They're
guess that's
here,
my first question.
mostly because of farming. So they were like an agricultural bird at one point, and then for like eggs and food, I think, and
So they were bred?
then pets, yeah.
Keep them as pets.
Oh.
And then they were released.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they get ducks and they decide, I don't want this duck anymore, they take it to the local pond and dump it there.
Exactly.
Oh.
Then we end up with.
So thinking about an ethic in that sense, like what's ethical for the animal. Mhm. Same thing, kind of.
See them all over the place.
Yeah.
A couple in the pond behind our house.
They're kind of like a gang, and it's very different. Yeah.
So this next one, what about this? Is this okay?
Well, it depends. Was there the sick baby that lost its
It depends
parents?
on who you're talking to on the raccoon issue.
What if it's a rehab patient?
That's what I was thinking.
But if it's gonna be released, should we still be doing that?
And then the next question is, where is that picture being seen? Because I see a lot of people on Instagram who are playing with wild animals. That's probably not a good idea.
That was my next point. Even if, so if this is an educational animal that was not to be released into the wild, is this still an okay message to be sending?
Probably not to the general public.
Mhm.
Now without the price tag and the fines that come with that.
Yeah, so thinking about things like that. What about this? So we have an outdoor cat. So we really get some arguing going.
Buy that bird feeder.
So is it okay for cats to live outdoors with the impact that they have on wildlife? What is the solution with feral cats? Because again, the ethics behind that, is it okay to euthanize the feral cats for the benefit of wildlife or?
What about your rats?
That's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the ones in the ride have been clipped, so they're
Mhm.
trapped and neutered.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about that aspect, like with animal welfare versus wildlife, trying to form ethics based on that. Mhm. So about looking back with habitat fragmentation, so a developer planned this subdivision out and they left a lot of untouched acreage in the middle of the development. Do we think it's better than nothing that they left some habitat untouched, even though a lot of wildlife is still gonna struggle to survive in this. With habitat fragmentation being an issue, better than nothing, or, thinking about the ethics behind that and how we push for things like this, to still support wildlife and balancing development. So trying to think of that in a ethics component. What about this? Is this okay?
Lovely and dead.
So when we think about this, a lot of times people like this type of landscaping, because it looks more aesthetically nice and there's not a risk of like alligators coming to into your yard and a lot of other safety things. But ecologically, this is terrible. So what's the balance between that and forming your ethic along the lines of balancing human safety versus development and wildlife support? And what about this? So here we have two different predator species. We have a bobcat and her kittens, and then a coyote clearly in someone's backyard playing with a dog's toy. So what do we think? Is this okay for wildlife to be this close in proximity to people with the safety concerns?
Well, it's sad that we invaded their land.
So think about it that way. Do they need to be relocated because of that? Or do we just need to deal with it and adapt those hazing techniques into our routines? But where's the line of adapting to that and putting like kids or animals at risk? So thinking about ethics from that standpoint too. What about this picture?
Oh.
Is this good or bad? Do we know what they're doing in this picture?
Doesn't matter. We didn't like it.
This is actually a wetland remediation project. So,
All right.
when we're thinking about things, we want to make sure we're understanding the full thing that's going on, because at first glance, this looks terrible.
Yes.
But this is a picture my coworker took of a project that he worked on. And then same with this one picture. Is this okay? Do we know what's going
on? What's going on?
So again, looking at it firsthand, this might look.
Or something.
Yes, so this is a seed drill. So this is a prairie restoration project. But again, looking at it, you might think, oh, this is, mass farming or who knows what.
Right.
So again, trying to understand what's going on. Not all things are cut and dry. So when you're forming your ethics and looking more in deep into these things, just taking those things into account too.
Good point.
So now moving away from that, we've talked about the ethics side. Now we're going to look at history of wildlife laws and some of the regulations behind these things. So looking at wildlife laws in Texas, here's some important dates when looking at the history of them. So we had our first game law established in 1861, which established a 2-year closed season on northern bobwhite quails on Galveston Island. So that was our first game law. And then about 20 years later, Texas establishes general game laws in 1879. And then in 1880, in typical Texas fashion, 130 counties claim exemption from these laws. And then in 1895, the Fish and Oyster Commission was established in Texas, which was what Texas Parks and Wildlife used to be known as, but back then it was primarily for regulating fishing. So it's come a long way since then, but that's how Parks and Wildlife started. And then another important date to know federally is in 1900, the Lacey Act was created, which prohibits the trade in wildlife, fish, and plants that have been illegally taken, possessed, transport, or sold. And then the Endangered Species Act, which is another US federal law, was passed in 1973 that obligates federal, state governments to protect all species threatened with extinction that fall within the borders of the US and outlying territories. So the next thing what we want to consider when we're looking at wildlife laws is who owns the wildlife. So wildlife ownership has been discussed since the Magna Carta, which established royal authority and ownership over our governance of forests, waterways, and fisheries. And it wasn't until 1647 when public ownership of wildlife was established, and it's remained that way pretty much since. So essentially, you all own the wildlife. And then who pays for wildlife management? Wildlife is essentially a user pay system, so it receives about $7 million annually from the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is a excise tax on firearms and ammunition. So essentially, wildlife, especially here in Texas, is funded by hunters. And then the Dingell-Johnson Act is an excise tax on fishing tackle and boat motor fuels, and that's what funds the Inland and Coastal Fisheries Department and Management in Texas as well. And then some other important laws. So we talked about the Lacey Act that was brought up. That's important for all of you to know because it's still very much used today to enforce wildlife laws. So the law essentially prohibits interstate transport of wildlife, and it was enacted mainly because different states had highly variable wildlife laws. So it was created during the height of the egg collecting as a hobby and plume harvest for fashion. So when one state would crack down on these industries, collectors would just go to the next closest state that had more relaxed laws with this. And this caused a lot of species of birds, primarily egrets, to have huge drops in population because of that. So the Lacey Act kind of evens out the playing field during this time and is even today keeps all states somewhat in control of their own resources, but prevents that interstate variability. And we still see the Lacey Act being enforced today with an example is like federal game wardens will set up on the Texas-Oklahoma border, and they'll watch for trailers that look for people hauling deer in and out of the state. So, because we don't allow deer to cross borders due to like CWD issues and things like that. So it is a federal violation to do that. So that's one example of how we're enforcing it today.
CWD.
Chronic wasting disease, which is a really big issue with deer right now.
How close is that to Houston?
Chronic wasting disease. I don't think it's been found very close to this area. I know it's more of an issue in like Central and South Texas. I'm not sure where the closest case is off the top of my head to East Texas though. Okay, and then another important law to understand is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. This is another big piece of legislation that's an important equalizer between the states. So when it was enacted, it was between the US and Canada, but now it includes Russia, Japan, Mexico, and the Caribbean, and also equalizes management across the states in the US as well. So an example of why this was in place is snow geese, for example. They have the longest migration of any bird. So they'll migrate all the way up to Victoria Island in northern Canada and then go back down all the way into Central America. So if people in each of these regions are hunting the geese for food and livelihood with no regulation, there'd be no birds left to return back that following year. So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act makes sure that doesn't happen. And it's also the first legislation that looks at the entire population of something, not just individual species. And so this act will protect both songbirds and game birds and any other native birds to this country. Even those that don't migrate are protected. So like cardinals, turkey vultures, roadrunners, things like that. And then Texas Parks and Wildlife has state laws pertaining to birds as well, kind of formed within the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So we see laws like this where it's illegal to catch, kill, injure, pursue, or possess, dead or alive, purchase or sell, expose for sale, transport, ship, or receive or deliver from transportation a bird that is not a game bird, possess any part of the plumage, skin, body of a bird that's not a game bird, or disturb or destroy the eggs, nest, or young of a bird that's not a game bird. So this law pertains to like keeping and collecting any type of a birds, even the feathers, since they are protected under state law, and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So essentially, you're not permitted to possess any piece of a bird, feather, nest, or anything unless you have a permit to do so. But you can go like dove hunting or turkey hunting and take the bird as long as you have the proper license and tags. That would be your permit essentially.
So am I breaking the law when I find a feather on the floor, put it in my pocket? Like,
With one of the state parks because a picture of a feather that I took. And me and my girlfriend were commenting about how we love to collect feathers. And one of the state parks, I think it was Garner, they jumped in and they said, make sure that you only take pictures. And so like someone found it and then like got onto me. They said, don't be taking the feathers.
Take a picture.
And then when it comes to nests, they have the same restrictions as this part of the legislature. So there are educational permits that you can get to possess that would allow you to collect those materials. And then the Lacey Act comes into play with this too. So you can't move the nests, the feathers, or if you have pelts, without proper permitting as well. And then there are some exceptions to this, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Code as well, which applies to native and non-native birds. So birds like European starlings, English sparrows, feral rock doves, Muscovy ducks, Egyptian geese, they can be killed at any time and their eggs and nests can be destroyed because they are non-native species or species that really disrupt native wildlife. So you can use certain lethal control for certain native birds as well if they are proved to be hurting your livelihood, if they're a health hazard or other nuisance. But again, you have to go through a lot of hoops and hurdles to get a permit to do so. But those are some of the exceptions when it comes to that. And then the next law I want to talk about is the Endangered Species Act. So this protects species that are endangered or at risk of extinction or threatened, so likely to become endangered. And it designates critical habitats essential for species recovery, implements conservation plans to help species rebound, and it makes it illegal to take or harass, harm, hurt, capture, etc. these listed species without a permit. And then here's just a list of some native Texas species that currently benefit from the Endangered Species Act. So when we look at mammals, you have the ocelot. This is a wild cat native to South Texas, but there's fewer than 80 individuals that remain in the US due to habitat loss. So the Endangered Species Act helps support habitat restoration, wildlife corridors, and road crossing structures. So that act helps implement those things that come into play. When we look at birds, we have the Atwater prairie chicken, is another species where I think we have fewer than 100 remaining in the wild. So the Endangered Species Act helps fund captive breeding programs and other restoration projects for them. We have the Texas indigo snake. They are really important to our ecosystems, and habitat loss is the main reason they're on the Endangered Species Act list. So the Endangered Species Act protects the brushland habitats that they like to inhabit. And we also have the Houston toad, which is another, I think, one of the most endangered amphibians in the US. So again, captive breeding programs are in place through the Endangered Species Act to help stabilize their populations as well. And then looking at fish, we have the Guadalupe bass, which is Texas's state fish. And they're not currently listed, but it has benefited from conservation efforts tied to the Endangered Species Act. So a lot of habitat restoration and limiting any type of hybridization. So even things that aren't listed can be impacted positively by the Endangered Species Act. And then when we look at plants, Texas wild rice is found only in the San Marcos River, and they're endangered due to water extraction and pollution. So the Endangered Species Act protections help maintain critical habitat for that plant by regulating water flow and quality in the area.
I have a question. I wrote a book on Shakespeare plants, so I was photographing and I found wild rice in George Mitchell Preserve. So that was not Texas wild rice, it was a different species.
It might have been, I'm not sure. I guess I have to see it.
Because you said it only grows in one area.
That's what I've.
Is it possible it could be someplace else? Because it was growing along the water in George Mitchell Preserve.
Yeah, possibly.
Interesting.
So this next slide just shows that even employees of Parks and Wildlife aren't exempt from these rules either. So even being employees of the state, we have to be issued permits too with pretty strict guidelines. So this is a collection permit, just stating that we have to act within the scope of our authority to take, transport, release, and manage any wildlife and fish in the state for investigation, propagation, distribution, education, or scientific purposes. And then looking at master naturalists and like the legal status of this program, it's important to know that there aren't any differences in like legal status of a master naturalist volunteer before and after you start the course, even with the certification. So you'll still have to go through proper permitting and everything as a volunteer as well, even though it is through the state. And then looking at wildlife rehabilitation, this just explains that to be a wildlife rehabilitator, you also need proper licensing and permitting to do so. So provisions exist to possess wildlife for rehabilitation by licensed or permitted rehabilitator, and possession is allowed for transportation if that's your intent for having an animal on you.
So Friends of Texas Wildlife, the only one in the region that is truly permitted for rehab.
So there are like smaller rehabbers that may work out of their house or things like that, but they've been given a permit by Texas Parks and Wildlife to do that type of work, and they're regularly, checked to make sure that they're doing things correctly and things like that. So it is a permit that you have to hold, but there are lots of smaller individuals rehabilitating animals as well. And you can, if you go on Texas Parks and Wildlife's website, they'll give you a whole list of licensed rehabilitators. So if you do need to find a rehabilitator, do it through Parks and Wildlife, so that way you're finding someone who's legitimate and has the proper licensing. And then the last provisions is for educational use as well. So like I said earlier, you can have an education permit to hold wildlife and wildlife parts for the purpose of education. And these require a letter from a person with a collection permit to have these. So that is all I have for laws and ethics, a bit shorter, but I can take any questions on that now.
Can you go back to the Texas Master Naturalist slide?
Sure.
Can you talk about the second point? I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Oh, yes. So with the Master Naturalist program, you can't use it for private benefit to make money. So if you own a business, you can't advertise that you're a certified master naturalist to bring in business. So, although you can't use it as like a professional certification to help a business or things like that, it is still highly recommended that you have it on a resume as a volunteer role, so you can use it that way if you're like looking for jobs or things like that. And then, yeah, you can't really associate with like political advocacy as well. So you have to maintain, neutral political stance anytime you're representing the Texas Master Naturalist program. So did that cover?
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that point. So thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions?
I had a question about the possession of game bird, feathers. So you have to have a hunting license to possess, like a turkey feather? Is that, you
So
have to
with
kill the turkey, or you have a hunting license to collect the turkey feathers?
So say you shoot a turkey, you're allowed to possess the full turkey with that license, in order to keep the feathers and everything. If you want, like, if you just find a feather, technically legally to have that, you would want like an educational permit to possess it that way. So there's different ways that you can legally be able to possess parts of a bird. You don't have to shoot it necessarily to be able to.
So if I found a turkey feather on my property that I knew was from a turkey, I could possess it. If I had a hunting license, or
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like if you have a hunting license, can you take any feather that you find?
feather, but a game bird, that's what I'm,
I think with that,
you can have possession of game bird feathers.
it
So
should
that's a fine
technically
point, but-
be the bird that you
Your bird.
collected, but
All right,
there's a gray area, so I'm not really sure when it comes to that, if it dug that deep into it. It's a good question.
So those Davy Crockett hats are fully illegal? You know the raccoon hats?
Oh, yeah, I mean, if they were yeah.
They were real raccoons.
Yeah.
I think they had the tails on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's thank Addison for coming. On behalf of the Heartwood chapter, Virginia has a token.
That's sweet, thank you.
Open it up.
Just a silly token. Those of you who commented on my socks.
Great, thank you. I love these.
Yeah, thank you for
so
spending
much.
time with us
Of
today.
course.
Yes, so we just have a few things to cover before the end of the day. We have started that program for the moment of minute of opportunity for volunteers. And Monica, who's on the training staff, is going to talk about her minute of volunteer opportunity. We'll be doing this every week. Has anybody started volunteering? What have you done?
Jesse Jones Farm.
Jesse Jones Farm.
I do the greenhouse.
The greenhouse.
This is the only thing I've done at the moment.
At the moment, it's a great start. How about you?
I've been working with the herbarium at Mercer.
Herbarium at Mercer. Awesome.
I haven't started, but I've gotten information from like Houston Wilderness Park. They have a lot of invasive species that need to go, so.
That need to go.
If
And
anybody's
there's a
out
lady
that
back
way.
here that's a great resource also. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm just doing the backyard bird.
Okay.
Wildwoods.
You have biobeds, yes.
I haven't actually started yet because of the freeze, but I'm going to be working with Terry on the pollinator gardens here and the native and endangered gardens at Mercer.
Wonderful.
I
Wonderful,
got my
yes.
rain gauge in so I can try to do the
Ooh,
cocoa rods.
yeah.
It came in huge. My husband said, "What did you buy?" I was
They
like,
are
"It's my
pretty
rain
big.
gauge. I'm a citizen scientist now." And after he got to putting it together, because he's a tinker, he's like, "Hey, this is pretty cool."
It is fun. I do it also every day. It's great. It's great. I put in a bluebird house this past week.
Oh, yay.
And the next day I had 6 scouts.
That's how.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a question about that. My Bluebird house already has an eggs and everything. And will survive the freeze.
Well, that'll be difficult. Anyway, Monica's gonna take it away.
So thank you. So I was in the class last year, so I was where you are last year and how am I going to get the volunteer hours? So this year what I did to see if it helped. So one of the first things I did and with the Jesse Jones, I went through the resources that you have and essentially look for sign up for volunteer. Then you sign up and they also have an app that they call Impact. And actually, when you do that, you get 2 things, they send a nice email every so often. This is just the snapshot of the latest email so that you can say like, oh, that's what is going on. Or if you have the app, it also shows the opportunity there and then you sign up.
You better impact and you do our thing here too?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then, so that's when you say like, oh, okay, there's some things that fit. Sometimes, there's some Saturdays where we don't have a class, so we can go there. And but the other thing is to find out, what you like after, I happen to of the Jesse Jones parks and I try to do that. There is a nature fest that they have coming up on the early March, just saying.
7, free.
And you do a number of things for the true nature thing. Or sometimes I just showed up at a homestead and I was like, I don't know, what that is. Well, they recreate life was, like a number of years ago. So you get the dresses and you start like chopping wood like they did, a lot of fun. I have done some versions of the great, bird count, something that Roxanne, I think Virginia passed along. So those are more practical because you essentially sign up, they give you sometimes some instructions, some webinars to say like how do you count birds. And then you say like, okay, this is where I'm going to count birds, and then you count birds. And also mention the Friends of Texas Wildlife. I have developed passion for owls and they, recover, injured wildlife. And if you search for their website and there's join us, look for volunteer, you click on that. Then they'll tell you when there's a volunteer session, of 2 hours. And I was like, well, I want to be a classroom. No, it's hands-on training. Day 1, you get to work with the owl. And then after you do that, they send you an email every quarter, like, hey, here are the days that are available. And then you sign up. Thank you, Monica.
Awesome job. Monica also worked on something else. You want to go into that?
Yeah, but this is Michael's fault. So last week, he said, what about a project? A project, like, could be class projects, you're saying? So like, what about if we start having, given the diversity, kind of a glossary to say like, how you say that, in English and Spanish. And I said like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. So what I did is to say like, well, where I start. So I picked the Texas state animals. And then I found the common name in English. Then, when you're trying to say like, well, how do I know what is the common name? I said, well, I first find the scientific name. And they said like, okay, what do we call this in Mexico where I'm from? Because I don't want to appropriate anybody's culture. And what I found is that starting from there are big mammals and small mammals. I found that it's interesting that Texas has the longhorn. So when I found I tried to find the longhorn, they said like longhorn cattle in Spanish. So it was like, okay, simple. Now the small mammal is the armadillo. And then in Spanish, armadillo, oh, that's kind of nice, so it's, so no problem there. So then going on to the, then we have a little bit, the Mexican retail bat. So, okay, in Spanish, murciélago bat, okay, makes sense, but we call it like mouse tail bat.
Feel like, yeah, that's interesting. Then moving to the bird, I did not know the mockingbird was the state bird, in Texas. And what is found is that, the mockingbirds, because they do a lot of noises, and the scientific name says like, oh yeah, a lot of noises that, makes sense. But then, and I really want to know what this bird is called somewhere else, because in Mexico, I call it the first word that is really from the Nahuatl and old language, and that means 400 voices. But I was the top thing, according to Google, I should be calling in sentences like nobody calls that, I don't know where it comes from. Then we have, as mentioned, the endangered Guadalupe bass, that is robalo in Spanish. But really, I really love the reptile. So there is the Texas horned lizard. I was looking at the translation. For some reason, in Mexico, we call them chameleons.
Oh.
They're not chameleons, they're lagartijas, they're lizards, but it's like, okay, so. And as for instance, the monarch, butterfly, mariposa monarca, that kind of makes sense. But, at some point, I would like to see if, how do we call even in Spanish in other countries, but because it may be, probably different common name.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So I highly encourage you, I noticed some of you were screen capturing her volunteer opportunities. There's that birding competition coming up. I know a lot of people in here are birders. So maybe create teams and enter the competition as the Heartwood chapter intern group, and maybe you'll win. Maybe you get some swag, who knows? So good luck with that, and please do that. Virginia had a few things to say. I know that she sent out an email last week dated January 25th. I still have record of her emails. And she highlighted the Heartwood YouTube channel, the listserv, the chapter directory, and a temporary link to sign up for bulletins and newsletters. Did you want to add something to that?
I wanted to highlight how you make up a class. If you miss a class, there's a couple options you can do. You can go to another chapter's presentation of that class. So we have the Piney Woods chapter, we have the Gulf Coast chapter. So if you think you're going to miss a class, let me know. And then I'll give you the links to those chapters so you can find out when the meetings are. Or you can watch it on YouTube. And I actually, last thing I did before coming here today, my spare time, I put up our last class. So if you go to our YouTube channel, there's gonna be a playlist. So if you go to playlists, from now on, there's a playlist that's 2026 initial training, and there's our last class. It takes me a little while to get it out there because I edit out the breaks. I edit out some things like Melissa's personal email address. I edited out a few other, the password for the directory is not in there. So there's your class. I'm like,
Michael.
So that's where you can find it. But if you're gonna watch a YouTube for credit, you can only do 2 classes. So if I were you, I would optimize it and do a session that's 4 hours long instead of a session that's 2 hours long. And then you'll get 4 hours of credit. Also, if you're going to do that for credit, you need to email the training ID. We will send you a little list of questions that we would like you to answer after you watch the class. And then if you have any questions about the class, ask us in that email that you send back to us. Because the state has this rule that they would like us to have every single class interactive, but that's not always possible for everybody, right?
Right.
So that's why we offer you more hours than you need, and we let you do this 2 classes on YouTube. So if you're going to do it, optimize it, send an email to training, and we'll get you going.
This is a kinder, gentler chapter.
kinder,
I went
gentler.
to the state conference and I learned that there's some chapters that have tests after each class,
Yeah.
so we're kind of kinder.
Other thing I wanted to show really fast was if you haven't done the listserv, if you go to the Texas Master Naturalist Program main website, there's the listserv where you can join the listserv. And if you're on the listserv, you should have gotten an email this week saying, hey, TMN Tuesday is coming up in 2 weeks. So what's TMN Tuesday? Once a month, they have a webinar. You can watch that for AT credit. It's usually an hour long, I think.
An hour, yeah.
And the other cool thing about the TMN Tuesdays is if you miss one, you can come back in. Well, there's not any up there yet. So maybe, oh, here we go, January. Oh, no, it's not, they're not up there yet. Usually, oh, that's the next one. This is the February one. But after they do their TMN Tuesday, they will post the recording of it. And that is something that you can watch virtually as a recording and get AT credit. That's the only thing that you can do that. Otherwise, you have to be in a webinar or Zoom or in person for AT credit. You can watch it so anything during 2026, you can watch any of those and get credit during 2026, not the 2025 ones. You can go watch those. Those are great, but you won't get any credit for those.
And there's no limit. You can watch all 12.
You can watch all of them.
So
But yeah,
12 hours,
yeah,
18.
exactly. So you get all your AT doing that. It's great to watch them in person. So if you're on listserv, you get that email and it's coming up in
2 weeks.
2 weeks, and it's about the bobcat. What is bobcat?
Yes.
We have a
We're gonna
bobcat
do
here.
that.
It's
All right.
lunchtime. It's like.
It's
12 to
lunchtime.
1.
Yeah. And I think if you haven't sent your picture in, send your picture in. That's it.
So next class will be held at Texas AgriLife, same place we were last class, in that remote building. And it will start at 8 o'clock. Our topics of conversation will be What's That? By Sam Hill. I think it's kind of comical how Sam Hill is going to be talking about what's that. If you know anything about Sam Hill. And then Wetlands, Texas Waters and Watersheds by Don Stacy. So that will be our topics. Please review those topics in your book prior to class and review after today's class. We appreciate y'all being here. I have one last